That morning, I was still struggling to open my eyes in the daze of a hangover, but I didn't expect to hear a hurried knock on the door. I opened the door and saw a woman who was so beautiful that it made my heart beat faster. She had a cold expression and sharp eyes, and she said almost without any emotion, "You have to be responsible for me. I am pregnant with your child." I was suddenly struck by lightning, and my head was buzzing. What was going on? I desperately searched my memory, trying to recall that drunken night, but I couldn't confirm whether the child was mine. In an instant, my mood fell to the bottom, but this was not the worst. Almost at the same time, fate played a cruel joke on me. The house I rented changed its owner, and the old landlord asked me to move out immediately. I was instantly homeless. However, when I learned that my new landlord was also a beautiful woman with a cold and noble temperament, a glimmer of luck flashed through my mind. Maybe this would be a turning point. After all, as a down-and-out young man, I also had the fantasy of being close to the water tower. I tentatively proposed the idea of sharing the apartment, trying to sound harmless and sincere, but she just looked at me coldly and said one word to me mercilessly: "Get lost." At that moment, my lucky thoughts were completely shattered. She was forcing me to move out of the house immediately without any mercy. There was no room for negotiation and no mercy at all. I suddenly fell into the dilemma of being homeless without even a place to stay. But I didn't expect the appearance of the third woman to bring me. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share. If you like this story, please let me know in the comment section. I will update the next part. Chapter 1. I'm pregnant with your child. On a rainy evening, the cold wind mixed with autumn leaves swept across the city. Kelly and I stood at the entrance of the municipal maternity and child hospital with umbrellas in hand. The lights reflected a faint shadow on the wet ground. Her face was a little pale, and her tone was but unusually calm. "Max, I'm pregnant." Hearing this, I was stunned for a moment, then frowned and said, "Then you should go find the person who made you pregnant. Why are you looking for me?" Her tone suddenly hardened. "I have only had a relationship with you this year. If you don't take responsibility, then I will." I sneered. "I said I only slept with you in a year. Do you believe it?" There was a trace of contempt on her face. "Max, are you still a man? Stop pretending." I waved my hand impatiently. "We're all adults. We were just playing around. Don't act so serious. If you want me to be responsible, you have to have some proof, right? Who wants to be a fool?" Kelly lowered her head, her voice weak. "The child is gone. How can there be any proof?" Hearing this, I got angry. "Do you think I'm really stupid? You just blame me for losing your child?" I took out my wallet and threw a few $100 bills at her. "You just want money, don't you? Take it, and don't bother me again." She took the money silently, said nothing more, and turned to walk towards the hospital with her umbrella. Looking at her lonely back, a complex emotion suddenly rose in my heart. I didn't believe that the child was mine, and I couldn't stand her current predicament. If she was living well, why would she come to pester me? After hesitating for a moment, I called out to her, "Wait." She looked back at me, her eyes still cold. I took out a bank card from my wallet and handed it to her. "This card can still be used for overdrafts. I just had surgery, so I want to buy some things to replenish my body." She stared at the card and said softly, "No need. I'm not looking for you for money. I just want you to know that I don't want to get pregnant without knowing why and then be abandoned without knowing why." At night, I came to the bar alone, feeling as heavy as the gloomy weather. I sat at the bar, drinking and waiting for my friend Leo. He is the only friend I can confide in this city, and like me, he often spends lonely nights in the bar. After a while, Leo came over with a briefcase and looked at me helplessly. "What's the matter that makes you look for me so urgently? Lend me some money." I took a long drag on my cigarette and exhaled a puff of turbid smoke. "I'm being blackmailed," Leo said calmly. "Did you make her pregnant again? Go to hell." "I was really blackmailed this time," I said angrily. He sat down and smoked slowly. "Who blackmailed you?" "Kelly." I slammed the table hard, my heart filled with anger. "That model? Why would she blackmail you? She's accepted a lot of advertisements now. There's no need for that. She said she had only slept with me. Do you believe it? I am so unlucky." I was so angry that I gritted my teeth. Leo sighed and lowered his voice. "Max, you and I have been friends for almost 10 years. To be honest, I know that your breakup with Emmy is very painful for you. But is it really worth it to humiliate yourself like this? It's been 2 years. There's no need to continue to sink. Find a good girl and live a down-to-earth life." "Okay." When I heard Emmy's name, my heart suddenly trembled and my eyes suddenly dimmed. Don't worry about me, I'm fine now. Leo looked at me and shook his head. It's impossible to help a rotten person. Then he got up and left, completely forgetting that I had asked him to borrow money. I walked out of the bar alone, holding an umbrella, the raindrops hitting the umbrella, making a crackling sound. The street was slippery and shiny under the lights, and I suddenly felt like a speck of dust in this city, small and lonely. After struggling in this city for 2 years, all I got was endless emptiness. When I returned to the community, I was surprised to find a red Audi Q7 parked downstairs. This car seemed out of place in the dilapidated community. When I opened the door, I found the landlord, Lao Li, and a strange woman sitting in the room with the car keys on the coffee table. Seeing this, I was puzzled. How could such a high-end car appear in such a shabby place? The strange woman's eyes swept over me indifferently, which made me feel vaguely uneasy. Chapter 2. The Woman Driving the Q7. I once again carefully looked at the woman in front of me. She sat upright on the sofa, with long curly hair hanging down to her shoulders, fair skin, a slim figure, and a slightly upturned mouth, revealing a confidence and sharpness that could not be ignored. It is undeniable that she is an absolute beauty. At that moment, I actually felt that there was nothing in this world that could not be forgiven. Lowly waved at me. Max, come here. I have something to tell you. What about the rent? I'll pay it when I get my salary next month. Okay. My smile seemed a little forced. After all, I owed him several months' rent. Old Lee scratched his head and said, It's not about the rent. I have already sold the house, and this girl is the new owner. What? You sold this broken house? I looked at the woman in disbelief, and my tone immediately became impolite. Who is so stupid as to be willing to buy this broken building of yours that might collapse if it were shaken twice? Lao Li's face was full of embarrassment. He looked at the woman and said slowly, You have to move out tonight. I won't ask you to pay the rent you owe me. Old Lee, how come you become less irritable as you get older, even if you want to sell the house? You should at least let me know in advance. Where am I going to find a place to live in this heavy rain? Old Lee looked indifferent. Let's find a hotel to stay for one night. He obviously didn't care about my complaints. I sneered and turned to the woman. The house is yours now, so you can continue to rent it to me, okay? The woman shook her head and said calmly, I bought this house to live in myself, not to rent it out. Kelly, you're wrong. We are not friends. We are fuck buddies. Do you understand? There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while, and Kelly choked up in a low voice. I'm really scared to be alone. If you don't come, I will just fend for myself. I completely lost my patience. Aren't you going alone today? What are you afraid of tomorrow? Kelly mumbled something and hung up the phone. I rubbed my temples hard, feeling confused. Scum! A cold voice suddenly sounded in the house. I looked up and found that the woman was staring at me with an extremely disgusted look. She scolded me? I didn't care anymore and asked calmly, Did you eavesdrop on my phone call? The woman's eyes were cold. You have 30 minutes. I was stunned and looked out the window. It was a stormy night. I was so unlucky. After a moment of silence, I said, Girl, it's raining so hard outside and it's so late now. I really can't move today. Let's move tomorrow. Before 1 p.m., I will definitely move out. The woman hesitated for a moment and nodded. You must move out before 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I smiled and suddenly leaned closer. Girl, can you lend me some money? I gave all my money to others today, and now I have no money. She frowned slightly and responded coldly. I have no obligation to lend you money. The smile on my face deepened. Then I won't leave tonight. You can't let me sleep on the street, right? You can call the police, but we all know that neither Lao Li nor you are in the right in this matter. The woman looked at me, then finally pulled out a bank card from her wallet and handed it to me. The password is 6 zeros. You must leave before 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I took the card, secretly surprised at her frankness, but didn't think much about it. Maybe there wasn't much money on the card. After all, Lally knew my details very well. Before leaving, I said half jokingly and half seriously, Girl, why don't you consider living with me? I can cook and give massages. When you are tired and come home, I can provide you with a full range of services. Get lost, she responded coldly, picking up a pillow and throwing it at me accurately. I smiled, took the pillow, turned around, and walked into the wind and rain. Chapter 3. I Only Love You. Holding an umbrella, I quietly left the small house where I had lived for 2 years, feeling lost. I asked the woman to live with me not out of teasing or taking advantage of her, but because at this moment, I felt like a child without shelter, feeling empty inside and wanting to cry. But the reality was unavoidable. Lowly sold the house, and I had to leave after all. At a nearby ATM, I withdrew 1,000 yuan from the card as agreed and took a look at the cardholder's information. It turned out that her name was Linda. This name made my heart sink. Mi means food and clothing, and Kai means rich and colorful, but my life is now only hungry and black and white. Linda's appearance seemed to be a ruthless mockery of my having nothing. I found a cheap hotel and stayed there all night in the rain until the early morning when I fell into a daze. When I woke up, it was almost noon and there were more than a dozen missed calls on my phone, all from Kelly. Her persistence made me feel helpless. In the message, she even threatened me that I should have given birth to the child earlier and used this child to punish me for the rest of my life. I laughed at her threats. She wasn't afraid of becoming a single mother because of pregnancy before marriage. So why should I care about being regarded as a cheap dad with a false name? After a quick wash, I decided to go to the hospital, perhaps out of some remaining goodwill, or perhaps out of a sense of responsibility between friends. When I arrived at the Women's and Children's Hospital, I saw Kelly waiting at the door with an umbrella, still looking a little helpless. When she saw me, the anxiety in her eyes seemed to ease a little. Although I was full of anger, I held back when I thought of her lying on the cold operating table. She came over and took my arm, pretending to love me deeply. I impatiently broke away from her and asked directly, "Tell me honestly, whose child is it?" She calmly responded, "It's yours, Max." I sneered. "Do you believe that I can strangle you to death now?" Kelly said defiantly, "Go ahead and pinch me. Yesterday, I could have died with my child. Today, you're on the headlines and you're a beast known to the whole country." She came closer, and I stared at her, questioning her pregnancy time, wanting evidence. But she just looked gentle and continued, "If I hadn't had the surgery yesterday and gave birth to this child and let him call you dad, how happy would you be?" I suppressed my anger and pushed her away. "Stop making trouble. Go get the checkup, and when we leave the hospital, we'll go our separate ways." Kelly lowered her head and remained silent for a moment, then responded softly, "I won't bother you anymore in the future." After the follow-up, she was weakly hanging on the foredrip. I sat beside her in silence, feeling extremely depressed. The doctor called me outside the ward and told me seriously that Kelly's physical condition was very poor and that the conditioning after the miscarriage could not be sloppy, otherwise it might leave a root of disease in the future. I nodded in agreement and went to the pharmacy with the prescription. Standing in front of the pharmacy, the staff handed me a large bag of medicines and health products. "The total is 3,016 yuan. Do you want to pay by card or cash?" My eyes widened and I cursed. "What kind of medicine is this? It's so expensive." The staff member replied bluntly, "Did you see that guy? He just spent 8,000 yuan. Don't let your girlfriend get pregnant if you don't have money." I was so angry that I held back my anger and took out Linda's bank card, thinking to myself, the amount of money I owe is getting bigger and bigger. This is terrible. Kelly out of the hospital after she finished hanging the drip. The rain was still drizzling and the air was stuffy. After walking a few steps, she suddenly asked me, "Max, a crew invited me to Hungjian to film next month. Do you think I should go?" I responded casually, "Since there is a chance, let's go." She nodded and looked at me again. "By the way, I will take the health supplements prescribed by the doctor on time." I handed her the medicine bag and said casually, "It's okay, just take it on time." Kelly stared at me and suddenly said, "Max, forget about Emmy. When I become a star, I will only love you." She turned and left, disappearing in the rain like the wind. I was stunned for a moment and suddenly remembered that the agreed moving time had passed, and it was already 1:30. I quickly stopped the taxi and rushed back. Linda's stern face appeared in my mind, and I couldn't help but feel panic in my heart. How should I face her after using the money on her card? Chapter 4, A Wicked Weekend. When I got back to my place, it was almost 2 p.m. I paid the taxi fare and walked slowly towards my building. I was not in a hurry. It was the weekend, so I could go later. The only thing that bothered me was the 4,016 yuan I owed Linda. Even if I sold myself, I couldn't raise that much money. When I walked downstairs, I was stunned for a moment, and then I was so angry that my lungs hurt. All my luggage was thrown in the corridor, and some large items were soaked by the rain, especially the pair of black leather shoes that Emmy gave me, which had been soaked by the rain and were horrible. I threw away my umbrella, took out my keys, and ran upstairs angrily. I twisted the lock hard, kicked the door open, rushed into the living room, and yelled, "You bitch, get out of here!" I yelled several times, but the room was silent. I kicked open her door, and the room was empty and spotless, as if no one had ever lived here. I stared at the neatly tidied room, and when I thought of the luggage downstairs in the rain, my anger rose. I flipped over her bed, and the pillows and quilts were scattered all over the floor. The room instantly became a mess. Just as I lit a cigarette and stood in the room to relieve my anger, Linda quietly appeared at the door, holding a mop and a plastic bag from the supermarket with some daily necessities in her hands. She stared at me with anger in her eyes. Without waiting for her to speak, I grabbed her collar and dragged her into the room. The mop and bag in her hands fell all over the floor. The room went from tidy to messy in an instant. I pulled her to the window, pointed at the luggage outside in the rain, and yelled, "Are you fucking sick? Why did you leave my luggage in the rain?" She broke away from me coldly, her tone icy. "If you didn't come on time, I would find someone to help you move out. Is that a problem?" In the wind and rain, the quilt and blanket were thrown downstairs, floating in the air like something ruthlessly abandoned. I looked at this scene and suddenly lost myself, regretting my impulsiveness. The pair of leather shoes Emmy gave me seemed to hurt my heart, reminding me of that dead relationship. I turned around and said to Linda, "Now we're even." Linda's tears finally came out. She bit her lips, her face full of grievance and anger. Looking at the messy house, I felt guilty, but I still refused to bow my head. "I know you look down on me and think I'm poor and useless. But this doesn't mean you can disrespect me. Today I threw your blanket. Next time I will throw you down too." After that, I took out her bank card from my wallet and put it on the table. I withdrew 4,016 yuan from the card. "Now I don't have the money to pay you back, but I will definitely pay you back." Linda's eyes as she cursed coldly. "Assholes. All of you are assholes who don't keep your promises." I was stunned for a moment, with mixed emotions in my heart, and finally said, "I'm leaving. I will pay you back the money I owe you, although it's late, but I won't break my promise." She didn't respond, but just looked at me with resentment. I walked out of the messy room, her tears and anger still filling my mind. I was indeed a scumbag. Just like Kelly said, a beast who couldn't control his emotions and acted recklessly. Carrying my luggage, I moved to a roadside pavilion to temporarily avoid the rain, but I didn't know where to go next. The money I had left was not enough to rent a house, and staying in a hotel was not a long-term solution. The only person I could ask for help, Leo, was now unwilling to talk to me because of my previous indifference. Sitting in the pavilion, I lit a cigarette and watched the passing cars, feeling extremely empty inside. All this stems from the woman I can no longer have, Emmy. I know I will never hold her hand again, but I just can't escape from that memory. Suddenly, the ringing of my cell phone broke my meditation. I took a look and saw that it was my dad calling. I picked up the phone and heard Tom's usual dull voice. "Max, I will be in Suzhou soon and stay at your place tonight." My heart tightened instantly. All the bad things that happened today were all collided at once. I hurriedly made excuses. "Dad, I have dinner with my colleagues tonight, so it's not convenient." "Isn't the key under the door frame? I can go in by myself." "I left my keys here. There are so many thieves nowadays, and I'm afraid I'll lose them." Tom's insisted. "I'll wait for you to come back. Don't be too late." "Dad, you must be tired after sitting on the bus for a long time. Let's go find a hotel near the station. You have to take a taxi to come here. It's rush hour now, and it's too tiring to squeeze on the bus." There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while, and Tom's whispered, "Your mother knitted a sweater for you. I'll bring it to you." Listening to the sound of the phone being hung up, I suddenly felt panic. I couldn't let Tom's see my current predicament. I picked up my luggage, resolutely stopped a taxi, and rushed to the house that no longer belonged to me. Whether Linda agreed or not, I had to move back today, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. In the wind and rain, I took a taxi back to the dilapidated neighborhood where I had lived for 2 years. After getting off the car, I subconsciously looked around, looking for Linda's red Audi Q7, feeling lucky. The car was not there, and more importantly, I had not returned the house key to Linda. I thought optimistically. As long as she didn't come back tonight, everything would be resolved safely. I quickly ran back to the house, put my luggage back in place as quickly as possible, made the bed, and then stood at the bus stop with an umbrella, waiting for Tom's to arrive. About a quarter of an hour later, a bus coming from the long-distance bus station slowly pulled up to the station. I looked up and saw Tom's getting off the bus with a briefcase in his hand. I called out, "Tom's, this way." He came over with some surprise. "Didn't you say you were having dinner with your colleagues?" Eating is a small matter. Your coming is a big matter. I still know the difference between the important and the unimportant. I took the briefcase from his hand with a smile and walked into the community with him. I kept mumbling, "Next time you come, just take a taxi. This is a business trip at public expense, and the money can be reimbursed. Public funds are also money, so we should save them if we can." Tom's was as serious as ever. Back in the house, Tom's took out a stainless steel lunchbox from his bag and handed it to me. "I caught some wild Crucian carp last week, and your mother cooked it and asked me to bring it to you. You can eat it just by heating it up or not." "Then let's eat this tonight," I replied casually. Tom's looked at me puzzledly. "Didn't you have dinner with your colleagues?" "Since you're here, of course, I have to come back to accompany you." I quickly changed the subject, fearing that he would ask more questions. We poured some sticky rice wine together and ate Crucian carp while drinking. But I was always worried that Linda would come back suddenly. If she came in and ran into Tom's, everything would be exposed. Just after I drank the wine, I heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. My heart tightened, and I hurriedly looked at Tom's, then at the door, and sure enough, Linda came in. Linda saw us and stood at the door in a daze. I quickly stood up, held her arm, and pretended to be concerned. "Have you been drinking? I helped you into the house. Don't thank me. We are all sharing a house. This is what we should do." I said polite words, but quickly covered her mouth with my hand and pushed her into her room in a few steps. "Scum, let me go." She struggled, her voice unclear. "Don't scream." I lowered my voice and said nervously. She reached for her phone, ready to call the police. I snatched the phone away, pushed her down on the bed, and used my body to suppress her struggles. It was an awkward position, but I didn't care. "Don't scream. I'll be finished if my dad hears it," I pleaded in a low voice. "Yes, I am an asshole," I whispered, "but my dad can't know how miserable I am. He has high blood pressure and can't bear this blow. Just help me and make it through tonight. He will be gone tomorrow morning. Please." Linda finally stopped struggling and let go of my hair, her eyes full of disgust. I breathed a sigh of relief and carefully let go of my hand that was covering her mouth. Seeing that she stopped screaming, I slowly stood up. However, as soon as I relaxed, she pushed me hard and I fell heavily off the bed. "Max, what are you doing in there?" Tom's heard the noise outside and asked. I endured the pain and said, "I bumped into the cabinet." Linda looked at me coldly, with a vindictive smile on her face. I glanced at her and warned her in a low voice, "Don't talk nonsense. My dad really has high blood pressure and can't stand the blow." She didn't respond, nor did she say anything else. I closed the door carefully and returned to the living room. Tom's carried a few bowls of porridge and said, "Go and give that girl a bowl of porridge. She needs to eat something after drinking." At this moment, Linda came out of the room with her bag. My heart tightened, worried that she would expose me on the spot. But unexpectedly, she said nothing and walked towards the door silently. Seeing that she was about to leave, Tom suddenly said, "Girl, have a bowl of porridge before you go." Linda turned around and looked at me, then nodded. "Thank you, Uncle." I almost breathed a sigh of relief. The two people who were at loggerheads just now were now sitting at the same table drinking porridge tacitly. I said nothing, my legs weakened with nervousness, fearing that she would let something slip. Tom's finished his porridge, stood up, and said, "You have someone staying here. I'll go stay in a hotel." I quickly said, "Dad, don't leave. Let's just squeeze in." Tom's waved his hand. "You've been snoring a lot lately, and it's disturbing your sleep." He then took out 2 sweaters and handed them to me. "Your mother knitted them for you. The other one is for your partner." I looked at the sweater and couldn't help but smile helplessly. Tom's and my mom always used this method to urge me to find a girlfriend. I glanced at Linda, who was drinking porridge, and teased, "It's cold now. I'll give you a sweater." Tom stuffed the money into my hand. "I know your situation. Go pay the water and electricity bills when you have time." Looking at the water and electricity bill he handed me, I felt a pang of sadness. I am such a troublesome son. Tom's finally disappeared in the rain with an umbrella. His words echoed in my ears. "Work hard." Watching his back gradually going away, I know what he is looking forward to. But I live in my own helplessness and struggle. Tom's, many things can only wait for the time being, okay? When we got back to our place, Linda had almost finished her bowl of porridge, but my bowl was still steaming. I took out 2 salted duck eggs from the bag left by Tom's and handed one to Linda. "Try it." Linda looked up at me and said in the most normal tone we had since we met, "I'm almost done." I smiled and said, "Have another bowl. White rice porridge won't make you fat." Linda didn't respond, but just said calmly, Your father is gone. You can move out too. I looked at the wind and rain outside the window and asked tentatively, if we don't move today, can we stay one more night? No. Linda was firm. I slapped my chopsticks and pretended to be angry. How can you be so unreasonable? If you eat my meal, you have to let me stay overnight. Do you understand the principle of being soft-hearted? Otherwise, spit out the porridge now, and I will move it immediately. Linda looked at me, speechless at my sudden change of attitude, her eyes flickering. After a few seconds, I quickly changed to a gentle tone. Sister, I've been tossing and turning all day today. I really don't have the strength. Please, just let me go, okay? She glared at me and said, since you've already eaten, you can have another bowl. After all, you'll be in a good mood. I shook my head helplessly. Humanity's downfall begins with this bowl of porridge. Despite the teasing, I still peeled the salted duck egg and handed it to her. She took the egg and continued to eat quietly. After dinner, I handed the 3,000 yuan left by Tom's to Linda. I'll pay you 3,000 first, and I'll give you the rest when I get paid next week. Linda glanced at me and said, do you have money to pay for the rent? Let's pay it back together. I smiled and said, you are thinking about me. It's not that I don't want to pay it back, but you asked me not to pay it back yet. I put the money back into my wallet. Linda disagreed and said coldly, as long as you move out quickly, nothing else matters. I held the bowl and drank the last mouthful of porridge, but my eyes fell on her. She was wearing a white chiffon shirt and black and white checkered pencil pants, and she looked thin and delicate. I took out a sweater from the ones Tom's left behind and gestured to her. It's getting cold. Do you want the sweater? It suits you well. Linda frowned. What do you mean? You want to use a sweater to make me go soft on you? I pretended to be serious and said, it really suits you. If you let me continue to rent this house, I will give you this sweater. My dad said that this was knitted by my mom. It is warm and windproof. Linda sneered. I'm not worthy of it. This sweater was originally prepared for my girlfriend, but I don't have any plans to do so for the time being, so I'm giving it to you as an apology for yesterday. I said sincerely. She was silent for a moment, then actually took the sweater and said softly, okay, I accept your apology. She turned around and warned again. Be nice to your father, don't lie to him anymore, and make him worry. I was stunned, then asked with a smile, is there a logical connection between accepting an apology and being nicer to my dad? Linda glared at me angrily. You are such a scumbag. Then she picked up the sweater, stuffed it into her bag, pushed the door, and left. I slipped into the bathroom with a smile and heard Leo reluctantly agree to Zhao Li's request. Back in the office, Leo was sitting in front of his computer working on a project plan. I asked with a smile, are you still working on the Gucci counter project? He sighed. Yes, the investment promotion department is waiting to use this for negotiations. I was about to say something else when Leo suddenly stopped and looked at me seriously. Haley and I are getting married next week. My heart ached, and I forced a smile and said, we're finally getting married. Leo's fiancée Haley was a mutual friend of Emmy and I. We were inseparable friends in college. Leo and Haley met because of us, but I ended up losing Emmy. Is Emmy coming back? I asked. I can't get in touch with her. Haley sent her an email, but she hasn't responded yet. I nodded, but my heart was heavy. We had both wanted to get married, but now they were about to be happy, but I was left behind. I looked at the computer screen silently, feeling confused. Chapter 5. Wait a minute. On a rainy night, I sat in a taxi, feeling mixed emotions as I returned to the dilapidated neighborhood where I had lived for 2 years. After getting off the taxi, I habitually looked around to see if Linda's red Audi Q7 was parked downstairs. Fortunately, the car was not there. I even had a fluke thought that if she didn't come back tonight, everything would be fine. The key in my hand was heavy, and I hadn't returned it to Linda yet. This might be my life-saving straw. I quickly ran back to the house, put my luggage away, made the bed, and then stood at the bus stop outside the community waiting for my dad Tom's. About a quarter of an hour later, a bus slowly drove over. Through the window, I saw the familiar figure. I waved excitedly. Tom's, this way. He frowned slightly when he saw me. Didn't you say you were having dinner with your colleagues? He said. I took his briefcase with a smile and pretended to be relaxed. Having dinner is a small matter, but your coming is a big deal. He said nothing and followed me into the community. On the way, I joked, Tom's, you can just take a taxi next time. It's a public-funded trip anyway, so you don't need to spend this little money. He frowned and said, public funds are also money, so we should save as much as possible. His voice was serious and cold, and I didn't say anything more because I knew that he was always frugal. After we entered the room, he took out a stainless steel lunchbox from his bag. This is the wild Crucian carp your mother cooked last week. Just heat it up when you want to eat it. My heart warmed a little, and I suggested, let's eat it tonight. As I was speaking, I suddenly felt nervous, worried that Linda would suddenly show up and Tom's would find out the truth, and I would be in big trouble. Sure enough, not long after, I heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. My heartbeat instantly accelerated. Linda was back. When the door opened, Linda was stunned to see Tom's and me in the living room. Tom's didn't react at all. He might have thought she was my roommate or even my girlfriend. I walked up to her calmly, covered her mouth with my hand, and whispered, "Don't make trouble. If my dad knew I live here, he would be mad to death." Linda's face was full of anger. She struggled and wanted to scream, but I had no choice but to push her into the room and try to calm her down. She struggled to take out her phone, and I quickly snatched it away and held her down. "Just help me this time. Okay, I promise I will never bother you again." I begged her eagerly. Linda seemed to be moved by my attitude and stopped struggling, but her eyes were still full of disgust. I let go of her, and my heartbeat slowed down a little, but suddenly Linda pushed me hard, and I lost my balance and fell to the ground. Tom's voice came from outside the door. "Max, what are you doing?" I quickly replied. "I bumped into the cabinet." Tom's didn't ask any more questions. In the living room, I carefully filled 3 bowls of porridge and returned to the dining table. Linda actually sat down. I felt a little uneasy, thinking that she would expose me in front of Tom's, but she didn't. She just lowered her head and drank the porridge. Tom's finished his meal woodenly, stood up and said, "You have someone staying here. I'll go to the hotel." I hurriedly persuaded him to stay, but he waved his hand and handed me a sweater. "Your mother knitted it, one for you and one for your future partner." I smiled bitterly, turned to look at Linda, and teased, "It's cold. I'll give you a sweater later." She glared at me coldly and said nothing. Before leaving, Tom's took out 3,000 yuan and said, "Take it, don't save it." I declined, saying, "I will get my salary next week. You can keep it to buy some health products for Mom." He couldn't persuade me, so he just put the money on the table and left silently. When I sent him downstairs, the rain was still falling. He was holding an umbrella, and his back looked old and weak in the rain. "That girl is pretty good," he said. I followed his gaze to the red Q7 and smiled bitterly. "Tom's, stop fantasizing. She's not my type." He remained silent, continued to walk into the rain, and disappeared into the night. I watched him walk away, feeling mixed emotions. In this heavy reality and helplessness, I know I still have many expectations that have not been realized. But these expectations may have to be put aside temporarily. Chapter 6. They're getting married. The sound of raindrops was dripping, but the atmosphere in the house was strangely quiet. Linda's bowl was empty, while my bowl of rice porridge was still steaming. I took out 2 salted duck eggs from the bag left by Tom's, peeled one, and handed it to Linda. "Try it." Linda rarely responded in a normal tone. "I'm almost done eating." This was the first time she spoke to me so calmly since we met. "Have another bowl. White rice porridge won't make you fat." I smiled nonchalantly. Linda looked up and said coldly, "Your father has left. It's time for you to leave too." Looking at the wind and rain outside the window, I asked tentatively, "Is it okay if I don't move today and stay one more night?" "No." She refused mercilessly. The fire in my heart instantly ignited, and I slammed my chopsticks on the table. "What's wrong with you, woman? Do you understand the principle of being soft-hearted? Otherwise, spit out the porridge you just ate, and I will move it immediately." She looked at me in astonishment, with a hint of surprise in her eyes, as if she was at a loss for words due to my sudden change. I softened my tone and said, "Sister, I've been going back and forth all day. Please be kind and let me go." "Who is your elder sister?" She glared at me angrily. "Okay, miss, okay. I swear. I will move tomorrow." I promised solemnly. Linda finally gave in. "Remember what you said. Of course, we'll move tomorrow." I breathed a sigh of relief and watched her fill another bowl of rice porridge. "Aren't you going to eat any more?" I joked. "I'm already feeling soft-hearted, so it doesn't hurt to have one more bowl." She responded calmly. I shook my head and sighed. Alas, this is how people degenerate. We continued to eat in this weird atmosphere. I think this might be the most peaceful moment between us. I handed her a peeled salt duck egg, and she took it without refusing. There was a rare quietness on the table. After we finished eating, I handed her the 3,000 yuan that Tom's had left behind. I'll pay you back 3,000 first, and I'll give you the rest when I get paid next week. She looked at me and said, "You still have to rent a house, right?" "No hurry. I'll pay it back when you pay it back." "Is this what you were thinking about me?" I smiled. "Well, if you say so, then I won't pay it back." I put the money back into my wallet. She took a sip of porridge and seemed to like this simple rice porridge very much, but still said indifferently, "As long as you move out quickly, nothing else matters." I looked at her and smiled bitterly. Indeed, there is nothing worthy of her liking someone like me. It is normal that Linda doesn't like me. After tomorrow, we will be even. I stood up, took out the knitted sweater that Tom's left behind, and gestured pretentiously. "It's getting colder. This sweater will definitely suit you." She frowned. "You still want me to owe you a favor?" I handed it over with a smile. "Consider it my apology for what happened yesterday. Look, this sweater was knitted by my mother herself. It's very thick." Linda hesitated for a moment and finally took the sweater and said to me calmly, "Okay, I accept your apology, but you'd better be nice to your dad and stop lying to him." Her words took me by surprise. What does accepting an apology have to do with being nice to my dad? Linda glared at me and said angrily, "You are such a scumbag." Then she pushed the door and left. I was the only one left in the empty room, and I recalled her last anger. Perhaps she accepted my apology only because she sympathized with Tom's, and she still hated me. I knew this very well. After all, in her eyes, I was a bastard who was full of lies, deceived my father, and was tough and untrustworthy to her. What else could I be but a scumbag? That night, Linda didn't come back. I sat alone in the room. Her image filled my mind. Why did she live in such a shabby place? She had other options, but she chose to live here. I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't want to think about it anymore. Maybe some things are just incomprehensible, and I'm used to living in confusion. The next day, after the regular meeting in the office, my colleague Leo and I walked out of the meeting room side by side, followed by Zhao Li. I lit a cigarette and called Zhao Li. "Come here, Zhao Li." "What?" Zhao Li looked at me warily. "I heard that you like outdoor sports. I have a set of professional equipment. I'll sell it to you for 2,000 yuan. Zhao Li's eyes lit up. "Really?" I waved my hands impatiently. "Of course it's true. Give me the money quickly." Zhao Li took out the money without saying anything, and I took it and smiled secretly. Suddenly, Leo behind me shouted, "That's mine." He said to Zhao Li helplessly, "Forget it. I will give you the equipment tomorrow." Back in the office, I sighed and turned on my computer and suddenly heard Leo say, "Max, Haley and I are getting married next week." My heart suddenly sank, and the memories and pain of the past suddenly flooded into my mind. Once upon a time, the four of us were so close, but now, only they have reached the end. And I've already lost Emmy. I suppressed the turmoil in my heart and took Leo's wedding invitation with a smile. "Congratulations, buddy." But deep down, I know that some things are ultimately irreversible. Chapter 7. The child is yours. That day, I was in a trance until the evening light shone obliquely on the glass, and I realized that it was time to get off work. Leo next door was still busy, but I was relatively free, so I decided to go to the bathroom to smoke a cigarette and wait for the end of work. When I came back, I saw Haley sitting on my chair, obviously waiting for Leo. I teased her. "Haley, have you gained weight again? My chair can no longer accommodate you. You look so stupid, so frivolous." She rolled her eyes at me, still not hiding her sexy charm. She is tall, with round and perky buttocks and a pair of long legs that are particularly eye-catching. A woman like her, walking on the street, will definitely be the one that attracts the most attention. I patted Leo on the shoulder and asked, "Have you finalized the general framework of the project plan?" "Almost done. Some of the text descriptions at the end haven't been finalized yet." Leo nodded. "You can get off work first. I'll take care of the rest. Don't keep Haley waiting for you," I said casually. Haley came over happily and patted my face. "Max, you are such a good person. We are very busy tonight. It's normal to be busy after getting married." I smiled and pushed her hand away. Leo finally stood up and stretched his stiff body. "Okay, we still have to go to the wedding company and the bridal shop. Call me if you have any questions." He packed his things hurriedly. Before leaving, Haley suddenly thought of something and turned back to me and said, "Max, our company's property is about to be launched. If you want to buy it, I can help you get an internal price, which can be 1,500 cheaper per square meter." The temptation of this statement was not small, but I could only smile bitterly. "Let's talk about it later." Leo also said seriously, "That's great, Max, buy it. There won't be many opportunities like this." The house price will only go higher in the future. Buy it early and suffer less. Stop joking. I don't have the money to buy a house. You two have to take care of the loan yourselves. I waved my hands. Haley was unwilling to give in. You have to think about the future. It will be easier to find a girlfriend if you buy a house. I was a little impatient. Just take care of yourselves and don't worry about me. It's getting dark, let's go. I urged them to leave. As I watched them walk arm in arm toward their newly purchased Mazda, I felt mixed emotions. The three of us were classmates at Suja University. Now they have a house, a car, and are getting married soon. But I'm still standing still. Why is there such a big gap between us? Is it a joke of fate? Or do I deserve it? At 9 o'clock in the evening, I finally finished Leo's project plan and got up to pour the last cup of coffee. While I was distracted, the phone rang. It was Kelly calling. Max, can you come and help me wash clothes? I can't get my hands wet. Her voice sounded a little weak. I said impatiently, you can take it to dry cleaning. But what about my bra and panties? Do you want me to dry clean them too? She said helplessly. Are you kidding me? You want me to wash these for you? I was immediately furious. I just had surgery and my hands really can't get wet. Can't you help me? Kelly's voice was choked with sobs. I was at my wit's end and could only sigh helplessly. Okay, can I go? Her tone instantly became calm. Then come quickly, I'll wait for you. After hanging up the phone, I stood downstairs of the company waiting for a taxi. Suddenly, I remembered that I had promised Linda to move. It was almost 9:30, but I thought, since I had already missed the appointment, I should go and deal with Kelly's matter first. I arrived at Kelly's apartment. She was wearing pajamas, holding a doll in her arms, and looked so haggard that it made people feel soft. The scolding I had prepared was swallowed back in an instant, and I just complained, "You are so troublesome. If you hadn't slept with me, none of this would have happened." She smiled gently, with a hint of teasing. I ignored him and walked straight into the bathroom. When I saw the two large dirty laundry baskets filled with clothes, I couldn't help but shout, "You deliberately saved up clothes for a year, didn't you?" Kelly didn't respond, but turned up the volume on the TV. I gritted my teeth and held back my anger and started to work. The humming sound of the washing machine accompanied me, and it took me an hour to finish washing all the clothes. I stood on the balcony and smoked a cigarette, and exhaustion finally came over me. Kelly came over with a fruit plate and asked softly, "Eat something." I waved my hand. "No appetite." She took my arm and said gently, "Max, a magazine said that a man who is willing to wash a woman's underwear must be a gentle and reliable good man." I scoffed. "Get lost. Who wants to do your laundry?" Kelly wasn't angry. She just held my arm and snuggled up to me. I pushed her away and said coldly, "I'm leaving. Don't call me again." She stopped me and took out a bank card from her pocket. "Here is 10,000 yuan. I know you have spent a lot of money recently." "Where did you get the money?" "I got an advance from the crew, so of course I have to pay you back the money I owe you." She looked at me with a complex emotion in her eyes. I looked at the card, feeling hesitant, but finally shook my head. "Forget it, you keep it." After leaving her apartment, I looked back and felt a sense of powerlessness. Although I scolded her, perhaps deep down, I sympathized with her. We are all people who have lost ourselves in this impetuous world, destined to live in a fantasy of nothingness, unable to escape the deep loneliness. Chapter 8. Your Punishment. The car slowly drove into the old residential area, and my first reaction was to see if there were any of my luggage downstairs. Fortunately, the ground was empty. Although I didn't move out on time, Linda obviously didn't throw me out. It seems that the last warning still worked. I walked upstairs briskly and opened the door. The room was completely dark. There was no light coming from the crack of Linda's door. It seemed she was not coming home tonight. Since she was not coming back, I could stay here for another night. This was probably the luckiest thing that happened to me today. After a quick wash, I lay down on the bed. As soon as I closed my eyes, the world became quiet. But I couldn't fall asleep. The past scenes kept appearing in my mind, especially Emmy. The emotional collapse 2 years ago still confuses me. I have never understood why Leo and Haley can get married, but Emmy and I have come to the end. What did I do wrong? This thought entangled me like a vine, and finally I couldn't stand it anymore. So I sat up from the bed and found a guitar that had been covered in dust for a long time. I wanted to sing a song for myself, or for Emmy. The melody of Lost echoed in the room. I'm lost, I can't find a way back. The people around me are all strangers. At the end of the song, my eyes were a little wet. In the past 2 years, I have been standing still, but her heart has already flown far away. Just as I was smoking to relieve my mood, there was a sudden knock on the door, which scared me so much that I almost broke the guitar strings. Linda's voice came from outside the door. If you want to sing, find a place where there is no one. This is a residential area. I opened the door, and Linda stood in front of me in her suspender pajamas. She looked particularly attractive under the light. I couldn't help but tease her. Didn't I sing Lost? How can you find a place where no one is if you are lost? She said coldly. It's a farce. Why are you at home? I was a little surprised. I've been here. I didn't see your car downstairs. It's parked in the open space opposite. I was about to close the door, thinking that if she brought up the idea of moving, I would be doomed, but then Linda blocked the door. You're not really going to let me move out now, are you? No. She paused. Aren't you lost? I'll take you to a place where no one will disturb you, and you can sing well. I was a little skeptical. Are you so kind? Since you're making me unable to sleep, I might as well be your listener. By the way, you have a nice voice, Linda said calmly. This surprised me. Maybe she was really moved by my singing, or maybe she just felt sorry for me. In any case, I decided to accept the offer. After all, I also had insomnia. A few minutes later, we went downstairs. Linda changed her clothes, and I followed her in my pajamas and slippers, holding my guitar. She drove the red Audi Q7, and I sat in the passenger seat. Before I could fasten my seatbelt, Linda had already stepped on the accelerator, and a strong push from the car almost knocked me against the window. You want to kill me? I complained, covering my head. You deserve it because you didn't wear your seatbelt. Linda replied nonchalantly. You did it on purpose. I glared at her, but there was nothing I could do. 20 minutes later, the car stopped in a desolate suburb. It was quiet and far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Linda pulled the handbrake and said calmly, There's no one here, just sing as much as you want. The car is too small to move freely, I retorted. Get off the car and sing, she said lightly. I glanced at her warily. You're not going to drive away while I'm getting out of the car, are you? Linda sighed helplessly and got off the car first. I breathed a sigh of relief and followed her with my guitar in my arms. The night sky was starry and the air was fresh. I felt an inexplicable sense of peace. I plucked the strings and sang Jean Woolin's Metamorphosis. Unexpectedly, after I finished singing, Linda actually applauded. You also like serious music? I looked at her in surprise. I didn't expect you to know this. It seems that you are not a complete fool. Linda chuckled. You underestimate me. I raised my eyebrows. She didn't say anything else, but just sat back in the car and looked at me quietly through the window. I sang another song, and just as I was getting into it, I suddenly heard the sound of a car starting behind me. I looked back and saw that Linda had fastened her seatbelt, and the car window was slowly rising. Your singing is indeed good, but I have to go. This is your punishment for breaking your promise. She stepped on the accelerator, and the car disappeared into the night like lightning. Fuck you. I was so angry that I took off my slippers and threw them at the car, but to no avail. I stood there, gritting my teeth. Just wait. I'm not done with you. Just like that, I was completely awakened after being left in the wilderness by Linda. I was such a fool to believe that she would be so kind. Sure enough, she had no intention of letting me off easily from the beginning to the end. Chapter 9. Repaying Evil with Kindness. Linda drove like crazy and left me behind in the middle of nowhere after 20 minutes. I stood there stupidly on the side of the road, realizing that I was at least 30 kilometers away from home. I had only one thought in my mind. Why did all the bad things happen to me recently? Picking up my slippers, I looked up at the Big Dipper, determined the direction, and began to walk towards the faint light in the distance. That journey was like an endless escape. Half an hour later, I finally walked to a road with cars and took a closer look. Shanghai-Nanjing Expressway. I really wanted to strangle that vicious woman to death. When it was almost dawn, I was picked up by a kind driver and taken back to the city. When I got off the car, I realized I didn't have my wallet with me, so I had to give the driver half a pack of cigarettes and ran back to my residence. I was furious. After returning home, I put my guitar on the table, ran to Linda's door, and knocked frantically. You're having fun teasing me, right? Do you know I still have to go to work? How can I work after you've tortured me all night? You support me. No one responded, so I continued knocking. Just try to pretend you can't hear me again. Believe it or not, I'll scold you even more harshly. Still quiet. I tried the doorknob, and it was locked. She had already treated me like a scumbag, so I didn't mind doing it again. I took out the spare key and opened her door. The room was dark. Linda was lying on the bed, covered with a blanket, with her back to me. I was still furious and walked closer to her and yelled, You were sleeping soundly. Do you know how much I have suffered along the way? The cold wind made my nose run. As I was talking, I sneezed, rubbed my nose, and continued to curse. I have lived for more than 20 years, and I have never seen such a dishonest person as you. I was about to pull her out of bed to confront her, when she suddenly started coughing violently. The sound stopped me. Fever? I was stunned and muttered to myself. It seems that she was caught a cold last night. God has eyes. You deserve it. I muttered with a sneer, preparing to turn around and leave. Get out. Linda's voice was cold. No need for you to remind me. I'd better cough to death, so as not to disturb my sleep. I strode out of the room, but when I was about to take a hot shower, I could hear her coughing intermittently. I stopped and started to struggle in my heart. I was the only man in the room. Should I just stand by and watch her die? Forget it. Even if I'm a scumbag, I should at least do some good deeds. I sighed, put down the towel, turned and walked into the kitchen. I found some ginger and brown sugar and boiled a pot of ginger soup. Outside the window, the morning sun began to shine, and the air was filled with a fresh scent. I was lost in thought as I watched this rare morning, and suddenly I felt a little lucky that this moment seemed to belong to me alone. Linda's coughing brought me back to my senses. I turned off the fire, poured a bowl of ginger soup, and walked into her room. Drink some ginger soup and sweat a little, and you'll be fine, I said, standing beside the bed. I don't need your kindness. She responded coldly. Who said I was kind? You coughed so hard that I couldn't sleep, I said unhappily, propped up her pillow, and roughly helped her sit up. I touched her forehead and found that she had a fever. I handed her the ginger soup and said, drink it quickly and stop talking nonsense. She did not struggle anymore, took the ginger soup and drank it slowly, and the indifference on her face eased a little. Take a nap after drinking it. When you wake up, take some antipyretic medicine and sweat it out and you'll be fine, I said as I turned and left. I put on my coat and walked out of the house. I went to several pharmacies to buy antipyretics. When I got home, it was already 7:30. I walked into her room and found that she was already fast asleep, breathing steadily. I didn't wake her up, but left a note on the bedside table. Remember to take your medicine when you wake up. Call me if you have any questions. I saved my number in your phone. The scum in your eyes, Max. After a quick wash, I quickly took the bus to the company, my mind full of last night's troubles. I was so sleepy. When I arrived at the company, I leaned on the desk, holding my chin, pretending to work, but actually I had already dozed off. Leo came into the office and slapped me awake. Going to the nightclub again? Thinking of what happened last night, I rolled my eyes. I've been tossing and turning all night. I'm so tired. He smiled and said, You kid, pay attention to nourishing your kidneys. Don't destroy yourself. Go to hell. Can you stop talking nonsense? I yawned and changed the subject. The project proposal is ready and saved in Drive D. He nodded and then slipped a note to me. I have to go to Shanghai to discuss cooperation today. Haley is going to the mall to buy something. You should accompany her. Are you getting married, or am I getting married? I said helplessly. He patted my shoulder and said, Thank you for your hard work. I'll treat you to dinner tonight. I was about to send him away when he suddenly lowered his voice and said, By the way, Emmy replied to the email and will probably come back to attend the wedding. This sentence was like a bolt from the blue. I was stunned and all my sleepiness disappeared. After 3 years, is Emmy finally coming back? Chapter 10. There are bad people among the masses. Leo and I walked out of the company building. He got in the business car, and I got in Haley's car. Leo just told me a piece of news that was enough to disturb my heart. Emmy, the woman who left me 3 years ago, is coming back. Along the way, Haley glanced at me from time to time. Seeing that I looked absent-minded, she couldn't help asking, Max, why are you so worried? This is not like your usual self. As soon as she finished speaking, she shook her head and said, It must be because Emmy is coming back, right? I nodded, opened the car window, and lit a cigarette. Haley sighed. I'm afraid only Emmy can bring out your melancholy. Don't think too much, she's not that powerful. I smiled and tried to be relaxed. Stop pretending, Max. The brighter you smile, the more hurt you are inside, right? Haley stared at me, her tone carrying a truth that I didn't want to admit. You don't understand me. I put away my smile and didn't want to say more. Haley sighed. Max, we have been friends for so many years. I really feel sorry for you and Emmy. But sometimes, the end of love is like a smoked cigarette. It has no taste when you smoke it again. It will only make your eyes red. You have to learn to let go. I took a long puff of the cigarette and was silent for a long time. Finally, I couldn't help asking, What is love? Isn't it just a promise and a lifetime of persistence? Why do you make a promise but don't have the courage to stick to it? Haley's tone softened. Max, love is never that simple. The ending between you and Emmy is different from that between me and Leo because we come from different backgrounds. Love sometimes needs the support of reality. You understand? I understand what she means. Before Emmy went abroad, her father gave her a Cadillac, but I had nothing. I don't want to admit the connection between material things and love, but I can't ignore its existence. Haley continued, Emmy once loved you sincerely. She went to the United States just to avoid her parents' forced marriage and come back 3 years later to be with you. But why did she break up in the end? Maybe. I didn't want to listen anymore, so I interrupted her. Okay, I understand. Maybe I really have become the secondhand smoke. I accompanied Haley to buy wedding supplies. We went our separate ways in the evening, but I was wide awake and had no desire to sleep. Walking down the street, watching couples cuddling under the lights, I felt endlessly lonely. I decided to go to the bar and drink some wine, hoping to numb myself with alcohol. Under the stimulation of the lights and music, I gradually became a little dizzy. At this time, Robin, the lead singer of the band I knew, came over and raised his eyebrows at me. Max, come up and play. I put down the bottle, walked onto the stage, took the guitar, and casually said to the band members, let's play Return to the Sun. The music started, and I played frantically to the rhythm, screaming and completely immersed in my own world. But after singing a few words, a long-haired young man stood up and shouted disdainfully, what the hell are you singing? Change the song. I stared at him and said coldly, say it again. The long-haired young man kicked over the drum set and shouted arrogantly, change the song. I couldn't bear it any longer, so I kicked him with my guitar and then swung it wildly at him. The scene was instantly chaotic, with bottles flying around. Robin and his bandmates helped me block some people, but someone not far away had already called the police. I hurriedly dropped my guitar and rushed out of the bar. The lights in the police station's interrogation room were glaring. An elderly policeman sat opposite me and asked me in a friendly tone, name, gender, and work unit. Brother policeman, that guy kicked our drum set first. I was just defending myself. I explained with a sad face. Stop talking nonsense. Fighting is wrong. It's not allowed by law. Do you understand? I know I was wrong. I will definitely be a good citizen who abides by the law in the future. I apologized with a smile. Okay, stop talking nonsense and go pay the fine. How much? I asked cautiously. 6,000 yuan to compensate the young man for his medical expenses and fines. 6,000 yuan? I was stunned. I didn't even have a wallet with me at that time. Call family or friends, the police said. When I heard the words family and friends, I suddenly fell into an inexplicable sense of loneliness. I have lived in this city for 2 years, but there is no one I can turn to for help. After thinking for a long time, a beautiful figure who hated me emerged in my mind, Linda. Although she looked down on me, I had no image at all. I took out my cell phone and dialed Linda's number. Chapter 11. Men are silent and women are in tears. The phone beeped a few times before it was connected. Before Linda could get back on the phone, I pretended to be concerned and asked, have you taken the fever-reducing and cough-suppressing medicine I bought for you? I ate it. Her voice was calm, with less disgust than before. Do you feel better now? Better. Linda answered softly, and as soon as she finished speaking, she started coughing again. Just put on more clothes and sweat a little. I continued with concern. Why would I wear so much if I'm not going out? Linda was a little disapproving. Hearing her follow my words, I finally got to the point. Actually, I need to trouble you with something. I'm at the police station right now. I got into a fight with someone, and I don't have enough money to pay the fine. Can you come over and help me? There was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment, and then Linda asked, did you fight? That's right. That grandson deserves a beating. I'm just helping him get his education in life. I said self-deprecatingly, I think you are the one who lives as you please. Linda responded coldly, but she didn't say yes or no. I started to get anxious. Are you coming or not? Can you give me a definite answer? Linda fell silent again, and this silence made me feel that she was deliberately teasing me. I became more and more anxious and couldn't help but urge her. Hurry up, they are going to lynch me. Before the other end of the line responded, the police officer next to me got angry and yelled at me. We are the people's police. What nonsense are you talking about? I immediately covered the phone and apologized with a smile. Calm down, calm down. I just want her to pay the fine as soon as possible. Brother, this way I could be released earlier, and you can worry less, right? The police officer made a helpless gesture and told me to hurry up and fix it. I continued to wait anxiously for Linda's reply, secretly worried. Will she cheat me again? After a few seconds, Linda finally spoke. Which police station? Hearing this, I quickly said Guanqian Police Station, as if I had grabbed a life-saving straw. Linda said, and hung up the phone. Although she agreed, I was still uneasy. She had just abandoned me in the wilderness before, and I didn't know what she would do this time. As time went by, I began to wonder if I had been tricked again. Just when I was about to give up, the door finally opened and a female police officer walked in and said, Max, someone has paid your fine. Bring your ID card to register. I stood up from the chair, almost fainting, and the weight of my heart finally fell to the ground. Linda, she really came to save me. After leaving the police station, the air outside was much fresher than I remembered. Linda smoothed the messy hair around her ears and coughed a few times. She was still sick, but she came to help me, and I couldn't help but feel a little guilty. I'm really sorry to have caused you trouble today. I scratched my head and said a little embarrassedly, but the fine and the money I owe you before, I can't pay it off even with next week's salary. Linda smiled faintly, not caring. You know you've caused me trouble, so don't cause trouble again in the future. I smiled bitterly. You said I was a scumbag, didn't you? I have to fight, play with women, and do everything to deserve this title. Linda glanced at me. The disgust in her eyes reappeared, and she didn't say anything. She turned around and continued walking. I hurried to catch up and lowered my voice to negotiate. I will pay you back the money I owe you next week, but I will have no money left for rent. Can you let me stay for another month and move out when I recover? Linda didn't respond, but just looked at me with a look that I couldn't understand. As we stared at each other in silence, a taxi stopped in the distance. The door opened, and a tall woman got out and walked towards us. It was Kelly. Kelly and Linda stood face to face. Both of them were of similar height and temperament. A male policeman passing by couldn't help but take a few more glances. Why are you here? I asked puzzledly. Robin told me that you were in a bar fight and were taken to the police station. Kelly looked at me with concern. I waved my hands. It's all right now. She ignored me and turned to Linda and said, Miss, please move aside. Max and I have something to say. Linda had no interest in staying long, so she nodded, turned around, and drove away. Watching Linda's back as she left, I felt an inexplicable irritation in my heart and lit a cigarette out of habit. Kelly looked at the direction where Linda disappeared and couldn't help asking, Did she pay the fine for you? Isn't this obvious? I replied impatiently. What is your relationship with her? It's whatever you think the relationship is, I said casually. Kelly lowered her head, looking a little sad. There was a kind of silence in the air. After smoking half a cigarette, I finally said, Go back. It's windy. You just had surgery. Don't stay outside. Kelly shook her head, indicating that she would not leave, and instead asked, Are you feeling uncomfortable because of the fight? I was stunned for a moment, and suddenly remembered that today's impulse was indeed related to Emmy. The 3 years of pain were triggered by the news that she was going back to China, and I couldn't even control my emotions. Stop asking, okay? I said weakly. Max, do I really make you so impatient? Kelly had tears in her eyes, and her voice trembled slightly. I didn't say anything. I just smoked in silence. We in the Wind seemed to be performing a silent tragedy. After a long while, Kelly said, I'm going to Hungjian next week. The crew will start filming ahead of schedule. I said indifferently, Then I wish you great success. Kelly sighed, took out a pen from her bag, and walked in front of me. Give me your hand. I didn't understand what was going on, so I mechanically held out my hand. She wrote a number on my hand. This is my new number. It's on 24 hours a day. If you need anything, you can always contact me. Looking at the number in my hand, I was a little confused and didn't know what to say. Kelly smiled at me and said, Next time we meet, we should say it's been a long time. Goodbye, Max. Watching Kelly leave, I felt a sense of sadness. No matter how much I annoyed her, after a while, I seemed to develop an indescribable emotion towards her. It was late at night, and I should have gone home, but I didn't know where to go. Although the old house could still accommodate me for the time being, if Linda really drove me away, where would I put this melancholy and loneliness? Perhaps I should have a good talk with her. No matter what, I didn't want to wander anymore. Chapter 12. Request for a roommate. As the night deepened, the alcohol began to wear off. I zipped up my jacket, lit a cigarette, and walked aimlessly down the street, stepping on the mottled shadows of neon lights. My mind was filled with endless trivialities, and an inescapable sense of boredom surrounded me. I began to hate my current life, and a voice in my heart told me that I should do something for my life. But the question was where to start. I knew nothing, and was even more confused. When I passed a hotel, I saw countless lights scattering from the windows, as if I could glimpse the figures behind those lights. Some people were intoxicated in the warm rooms, while others were struggling in the loneliness of the streets. And I, without a doubt, belonged to the latter. Such a contrast makes the world seem more real and full of contradictions. There is always someone who has to bear the loneliness, and I know that I am one of them. But tonight, the moonlight is too bright, as if all the loneliness is exposed in broad daylight. After returning to my residence, I habitually looked downstairs to see Linda's car. Sure enough, she parked her car opposite. I squatted beside the car and smoked a cigarette before going back upstairs. Standing at the door of her room, I hesitated for a moment and knocked on the door. "Linda, are you asleep?" I asked in a low voice. "Is there something wrong?" Her voice came through the door, cold but clear. "I want to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about between us." She refused directly. "At least let me say thank you to you in person. I really appreciate what happened tonight." I continued. "No thanks." She still rejected me briefly. I was a little unwilling, so I pushed open her door. Under the light, Linda was sitting at her desk, buried in a book or document. She didn't show any reaction to my uninvited entry, as if she was used to my rudeness. "What are you looking at?" I walked behind her and took a look. She still ignored me and focused on the documents in her hand. I stood there, thinking about how to tell her that I didn't want to move out at all. "Do you think it's appropriate to stand in a woman's room so late at night?" she asked coldly. "I just want to thank you. Nothing else." I quickly explained. "Then tell me quickly, and get out as soon as you're done. By the way, have you taken your medicine? I seem to hear you coughing just now." I asked in a flattering manner. Linda put down the documents and frowned slightly. "If you have anything to say, please say it quickly. I'm going to rest now." I knew she was losing her patience, so I quickly said, "To tell you the truth, I don't want to move out at all." I simply spoke out my true feelings, even with a somewhat provocative tone, trying to overwhelm her with my momentum. Linda looked away from the documents and said calmly, "I've already told you that you don't have to pay back the money you owe for the time being. You have no reason not to move." "You don't understand. I just don't want to move." I was a little anxious and raised my voice. Her face began to turn cold. "You promised me more than once that you would move out. Is your promise so cheap to yourself?" I retorted, "What's wrong with living here? I can help you fix the water pipes and light bulbs, and I can also help you collect your clothes when it rains. If you are sick, I will buy medicine and make ginger soup for you. Do you really want to make both of you unhappy?" Linda said calmly, "I'm not unhappy." This sentence instantly made me speechless, and the atmosphere froze in the air awkwardly. I scratched my head, remained silent for a moment, and continued. "Anyway, I owe you so much money. Paying you back first is more important than moving." Linda asked unexpectedly, "Tell me, why is paying back the money more important than moving?" "After paying you back, I feel at ease. Moving makes me feel like a helpless person. If it were you, would you choose to pay back the money first or move?" I answered without even thinking. "If you move out from here, you can still live somewhere else. Where will the emptiness come from?" Linda continued to ask. I looked around every corner of the room, and an indescribable emotion surged in my heart. Linda never understood my feelings for this house. It is not just a room, it is my deepest sustenance. I lit a cigarette, feeling lost. "Don't smoke in my room." She made no secret of her disgust. I walked to the balcony silently and finished my cigarette before returning to the living room. To my surprise, Linda was sitting on the sofa, seemingly waiting for me. "You haven't answered my question yet." She looked at me and said. I sat on the sofa opposite, closed my eyes, and my thoughts began to go back to the days when I moved into this house 2 years ago. Those days flashed by like a movie clip. After a long silence, I finally spoke. 2 years ago, I moved in here. That period was the darkest period of my life. I couldn't sleep every night, and my mind was full of unspeakable worries. I could only talk to the furniture, floor lamps, and mops in the room. They didn't respond, but they made me feel less lonely. So, this house is my friend. It gives me support, and I don't want to leave it. Linda looked at me with complicated eyes. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I just waited anxiously for her response. Chapter 13. No more nightclubs. The moonlight outside the window was surprisingly bright, pouring into the living room through the window, and even the lights seemed a little dim. And Linda's beautiful, cold face seemed to make the moonlight lose its luster. I stood aside, staring at her, feeling uneasy. Perhaps my attachment to this house could not impress her. Do you love this house? Linda finally spoke. I nodded repeatedly. I love it very much. I really love it. No one in this world loves this humble house more than me. She smiled and said, That's not necessarily true. I looked at her in surprise. Are you also the one who loves it so much? I've always been curious about why she and Lowly bought this house. Maybe I once assumed that this was a performance art of the rich, but I increasingly feel that things are not that simple. Instead of answering directly, she asked, How long do you plan to stay? Do you agree that I can stay? I said excitedly. Max, answer my question first. She was a little dissatisfied. I smiled awkwardly, afraid that she would regret it. 1 month, okay. Linda was silent for a while, and finally nodded. Okay, but you have to agree to 2 conditions of mine. No problem. I'll do whatever you say. I patted my chest and promised. Don't be so quick to promise. Wait until you can do it. She choked me rudely. You say? I will try my best. I smiled awkwardly again. She sighed softly. First rule, you are not allowed to go to nightclubs in the future. Can you do it? I was stunned for a moment. I didn't expect her to make this request. She looked at me calmly, waiting for my reply. Although I was confused, I didn't dare to ask too much. I just stayed there first. I nodded without hesitation. Okay, no problem. Anything else? Second, you are not allowed to enter my room while you are staying here. Also, you have to return the key to my room to me. This request is reasonable. I took the key from my pocket and put it in front of her. That's no problem. Linda stood up and said calmly, Remember what you promised me. If you can't do one of them, you have to move out by yourself. I breathed a sigh of relief as I watched her leave. Although I could finally stay here this time, I felt a sense of loss for no apparent reason. After washing up, I lay in bed, but my mind couldn't stop. In a few days, Leo and Haley will get married. As their friend, this news hurts my deepest vulnerability. In fact, I also want to get married, but my current living conditions make me feel that marriage seems to be an unattainable fantasy. Thinking of Emmy, my heart began to ache again. Would she show up at the wedding? Would she bring her boyfriend or her already married husband? These thoughts came to my mind involuntarily, and I laughed at myself secretly. If I really collapsed at the wedding, it would be too dramatic. Leo, who had just returned from Shanghai. I asked him over a cup of coffee, Have you finished the Gucci project? Leo breathed a sigh of relief. It's done. The contract will be signed next month. I patted his shoulder and joked, Well done. It seems you have a bright future ahead of you. He suddenly said seriously, Max, have you ever thought about your future career direction? I can help you strive for it. I interrupted with a smile. Don't worry about me. I will fight for my own ideas if I have them. Stop joking. When have you ever taken the initiative to fight for something? He said a little displeased. I smiled nonchalantly. Some things can't be rushed. I'm fine the way I am now. There's no need to work so hard to climb up. Even if the sky falls, it won't hit me. Leo shook his head. You're so unfocused. I interrupted his sigh and said, Okay, stop talking about this. I spent the whole day shopping with your wife yesterday. You have to treat me to a nice meal. No problem. Let's go eat together after get off work. Having said that, I always felt that Leo was a little abnormal. Just as we were walking towards the office, he suddenly stopped, looked at me deeply, and whispered, Emmy contacted Haley last night, and she will arrive in Shanghai at noon today. I was stunned when I heard the news. My mind went blank, and I didn't even know how to deal with it. Are you going to meet her? Leo patted my shoulder gently. I smiled bitterly and said, As what? As an ex-boyfriend? Leo stopped trying to persuade me, but I knew he was right. Emmy and I would meet sooner or later, but only at Leo's wedding. At that time, I might just treat her as an ordinary stranger, sometimes there and sometimes not. No more small talk, no more heart-wrenching. At noon, I sat alone in the office, feeling uneasy. Emmy's shadow lingered in my mind, and when I thought of her face when she left, I felt a tightness in my chest that made me unable to breathe. I knew very well that this was just meaningless self-torture, but I couldn't seem to get rid of it. Just when I was feeling distressed, my cell phone rang. Robin called and said there was an event at the bar that evening and invited me to go to the fashion show. He also said there were beauties to introduce to me. I agreed, almost subconsciously, but as I walked out of the office building and faced the sunshine, I suddenly remembered the promise I made to Linda that I would not go to nightclubs again. I hesitated for a moment and finally said to Robin, I'm afraid I can't go today. I have something else to do. Let's make an appointment another day. After hanging up the phone, I was a little surprised. Why didn't I choose to lie to Linda? Maybe her beauty made me want to keep this promise. Maybe there are other reasons, but I can't explain it clearly for the time being. Chapter 14. You are my new tenant. In the evening after work, Leo and I found a Chinese restaurant near the company, ordered a few dishes, and sat quietly. The food was served quickly, and Leo picked up the chopsticks and ate a few bites. Seeing that I didn't move my chopsticks, he looked up and reminded me, "What's wrong?" "Eat." Waiting for Haley, I asked doubtfully. "She went to Shanghai to see Emmy, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. It's just the two of us for dinner today." Leo's tone was calm, but the content of his words made my heart tighten. "Meet Emmy? Your wedding is coming up? Isn't she busy?" "She is busy, but this time she insists on meeting Emmy. It won't be a problem if she comes back tomorrow," Leo said nonchalantly. I nodded and picked up the chopsticks to take a few bites casually. He suddenly put down his chopsticks, stared at me for a while, as if thinking about something, and then asked softly, "How about you go meet Emmy too? She may not have gone far. I'll ask Haley to come back and pick you up." I was shocked and paused for a moment with the chopsticks in my hand. Then I shook my head and sighed. "Leo, you really follow your husband wherever he goes. Even your comforting routine is the same." Leo was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect me to say that. He smiled and tried to ease the atmosphere. "I just want to give you a chance, not to comfort you. Can you still eat properly?" I couldn't help but get angry, but Leo didn't refute. He sighed softly. "Max, are you really unable to get over this hurdle?" My anger gradually subsided, and I fell silent with mixed feelings. Emmy's name was like a stone in my heart, weighing me down and making me breathless. Leo took 2 cans of beer, tore open one and handed it to me, clinking it gently. "Come on, don't think so much." I took a sip, thinking of his words and also thinking of the years since Emmy left, when I had brief relationships with various women. Leo asked me if I had ever been attracted to someone, and I subconsciously answered, no. But before long, an unexpected figure appeared in my mind, Linda. That cold and beautiful woman began to occupy my thoughts. "What about you, Leo? Have you ever doubted your feelings for Haley?" I couldn't help but ask. "No, because we have decided on each other." Leo smiled and said calmly. His words made me ponder. Leo and Haley's relationship seemed to be perfect, but what about me? In those short-lived intimate relationships, what is true and what is false? As the night fell, we ended this dull dinner. After Leo left, I walked alone on the street, thinking about those tangled past events, and my inner confusion seemed to deepen. When I got home, the house was empty. Linda hadn't come back yet, and the whole house was cold and deserted. I sat on the sofa and tried to kill time by watching TV, but I was bored and couldn't calm down. I picked up the guitar and played it a few times, but I was still bored. Finally, footsteps were heard outside the door. Linda was back. She was dressed in a neat business suit and had a delicate face, as if she didn't belong to this old house. "Are you back?" I greeted casually. "Yeah." She responded coldly and went straight into the room with her bag. "Stop." I deliberately called her. She stopped, turned around, and looked at me coldly. "Tell me, why are you so beautiful? Are you a monster?" I teased. Linda frowned and hit back bluntly. "If you continue like this, I'll really feel like I've let a wolf into my house." I was stunned and couldn't help laughing. "Come on, I lived in this house first. You were the newcomer." She was too lazy to argue with me and said coldly, "Then you can move out anytime." Then she turned into the room and closed the door. I sat alone in the living room, lit a cigarette, and felt a sense of loss in my heart. What should I do next? Emmy was coming back, and I seemed to no longer be able to find that pure heartbeat. The smoke slowly dissipated in the air, but I felt more and more that I was trapped in the quagmire of loneliness and couldn't extricate myself. Chapter 15. Playing teasing on Linda. It was late at night, and the room was filled with an invisible loneliness. I lay on the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling, and the smoke slowly dissipated in the dim light. I know that boredom is the most unbearable torture for me. If it weren't for Linda's cold face that stopped me in the room, I might have been drinking in the bar with Robin and others, enjoying a fashion show full of beautiful women. The dissatisfaction in my heart slowly piled up into a high wall. I stood up and decided to knock on Linda's door to break through this boundless loneliness. I knocked on the door gently and said, "Linda, are you free? Come out and chat." She came from the room with the same coldness as always. "We have nothing in common." I raised my eyebrows. How could we have no common language? We all lived under the same roof. Didn't she feel that this depressing atmosphere was driving people crazy? "Come out. We all speak Chinese." We won't be able to chat. Please do something meaningful. There was a hint of impatience in her voice. I was furious. Who said chatting with me was meaningless? Her arrogant attitude made me feel humiliated, as if everything I did was insignificant. With resentment, I really found a spoon from the kitchen, sat on the sofa, and started spinning, making a soft metallic spinning sound. This night, I could only compete with a spoon. Half an hour later, Linda walked out of the room, apparently preparing to wash up. She walked past me without looking at me, walked to the bathroom, suddenly stopped, and glanced at the spoon on the coffee table. I looked up at her, and she actually had a smile on her face, but it was hard to tell whether it was mocking or funny. "What are you laughing at? I already told you I want to play with the spoon tonight," I said stubbornly. Linda nodded slightly. "You really keep your word." After that, she walked straight to the bathroom. I looked at her back and slapped the spoon to stop. This woman always managed to poke my self-esteem easily. Soon, Linda finished washing up and came out of the bathroom with wet hair, exuding a fresh and natural beauty. I couldn't help but say again, "Linda, please chat with me. I'm really bored." She stopped and responded coldly, "Go find someone as boring as you." Then she was about to go back to her room. I immediately shouted, "You said it. I'm going out to have some fun now." "Whatever. Just remember to take your luggage with you." She said this calmly, like dropping a bombshell. I immediately lost my temper and sat back on the sofa, not arguing anymore. This woman is always like this, high and mighty, not caring about my feelings at all. I know that she is rich and powerful, and I am just a poor boy living in her house. I gritted my teeth, feeling unwilling but helpless. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, and began to think back to my past. Whether it was past love or those boring nights, they were all like reflections in the darkness, looming. I thought of Emmy, who was once the most important person in my life, and now, 3 years have passed, and we are about to meet, but am I really ready to face her? The morning sun shines through the window into the house. I get up earlier than usual, feeling anxious. Today is a new beginning, but no matter what, I still can't get rid of the nervousness of the upcoming meeting. I try to cheer myself up, go into the kitchen and start cooking porridge, hoping to keep myself busy and drive away the chaos in my heart. Linda came out of the room, sleepy-eyed, still looking like a fairy. I smiled and greeted her. "Good morning, my female tenant." She ignored me, just glanced at me lightly, and continued to do her work. I know that she doesn't care about my existence at all, and I can only continue to use these boring days to cover up the irrepressible loneliness deep in my heart. Chapter 16. Two Shameless Thieves. When I got to the company, I opened my computer and browsed some social news as usual, and then browsed my friend's Weibo, hoping to find some funny jokes to amuse myself. Inadvertently, I found that Haley had posted a Weibo 2 days ago, which contained her and Leo's wedding photos. She tagged everyone except me. I knew in my heart that she was afraid that my mood would be touched. After all, compared with their happiness, the ending of Emmy and I seemed so bleak. One of their wedding photo themes is silent joy. In this set of photos, the two hold hands and stand expressionlessly in front of a smiling sunflower. This idea was once mine and Emmy's, and we plan to take wedding photos like this when we get married one day. Seeing this, my heart ached slightly. At that time, we were so happy to look forward to the future, but now we can only wish others to use this theme. Leo at noon, he suddenly mentioned the wedding preparations. He told me that Emmy would be Haley's bridesmaid. I was stunned for a few seconds and felt embarrassed. "I'm your best man, right?" I asked stubbornly. "You're not trying to run away, are you?" He joked. I muttered under my breath. "Haven't you two considered how embarrassing this would be for Emmy and me?" Leo said innocently, "I didn't expect that. We've broken up, and it's unlucky to be best man or bridesmaid, so I'd better withdraw." I shrugged and said half-jokingly. Leo agreed with a little regret, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Although I felt a little regretful in my heart, I couldn't avoid this situation. When I got home that night, I sat on the sofa and lit a cigarette as usual. My mind was full of images of meeting Emmy at the wedding tomorrow. The anxiety in my heart became stronger and stronger, and I felt like I was being dragged into a maze from which I could not escape by an invisible hand. Just as I was immersed in my own anxiety, Linda came back. As soon as she entered the door, she frowned and asked, "Can you please stop smoking in the living room?" I replied irritably, "What's wrong with smoking in the living room? I didn't go into your room to smoke." She said coldly, "If you want to smoke in the future, go outside, not inside the house." I glared at her angrily and secretly vowed to quit smoking. But when she entered the room, I lit a cigarette, took a deep puff, and felt the depression coming back. At this moment, the cell phone rang. It was Haley calling. "Max, are you asleep?" Her voice was a little uneasy. "I'm not asleep yet, just lying down," I said. "I'm with Emmy. She's staying at my house tonight." Haley lowered her voice. My heartbeat quickened, and my hand unconsciously clenched the phone. I responded casually, "Oh, not with Leo? Silly, he'll pick me up tomorrow," she said with a smile. Then her tone became serious again. "Do you want to say a few words to Emmy?" I was silent for a while, and just as I was about to answer, another familiar voice came from the other end of the phone. "Haley, what are you doing?" The call was hung up immediately. I didn't move, only heard the familiar voice echoing in my mind. It was Emmy's voice, still as clear as it was 3 years ago, as if nothing had changed. Haley later sent a text. "Did you hear Emmy's voice?" I was scared. I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to talk, but I couldn't make the decision without her. I didn't reply her text message. I just sat there quietly, thinking of Emmy at dusk 3 years ago. At that time, we were full of longing for marriage and were extremely happy. But now, reality has already torn our future apart. No matter what, we will meet at the wedding tomorrow. Perhaps 3 years is enough for me to learn how to face this past relationship, but why can't I still feel anxious tonight? Chapter 17. Meeting again 3 years later. I barely slept that night. Deep down, I still longed to go back to the past, back to the days when she still loved me, holding her hand and feeling the joy in silence. However, the reality was cruel. She had already turned away, leaving me to miss her desperately, and then laugh at how powerless I was to her. The morning sun shines through the curtains into the room, reflecting on the glass vase, refracting colorful circles of light. Today should be a beautiful day. Leo and Haley are about to get married. I try to get rid of all my anxiety and complex emotions, telling myself that I must have a sunny attitude today. I picked out the most handsome suit, shaved my beard, blew a haircut, smiled at the mirror, and made sure I looked presentable enough. Today was to give my blessing, and I couldn't let any negative emotions affect this wedding. It was almost noon, and the guests had gathered outside the hotel. I waited with them for the wedding motorcade. However, the motorcade was late, and it was rumored that there was a traffic jam on the road. This kind of waiting was simply a torture for me. I didn't want to endure this anxiety anymore, so I simply squeezed out of the crowd and sat on the stone bench opposite the hotel in a daze. My heart was filled with loneliness and desolation, and I was eager to make myself look less embarrassed. I took out my cell phone and suddenly thought of Linda. I called her and said casually, "Linda, let's go out for dinner." She said with a slightly alert tone on the other end of the phone, "Why?" "Consider this as my way of repaying you for lending me money and taking me in. If you don't give me a chance to express my gratitude, I'll be firmly established as a scumbag." I pleaded with her half-jokingly. Linda obviously hesitated for a moment and finally agreed. "Okay, give me 20 minutes. After hanging up the phone, I breathed a sigh of relief. Linda's arrival might help me hide this helplessness and loneliness. The wedding car team finally arrived. I looked at the beautifully decorated wedding car from a distance, and my breathing became rapid. The groom Leo walked out of the car, holding Haley with a smile on his face, and there was applause and cheers. I was silent in the crowd, but my eyes were fixed on Emmy, who walked out of another car. She was wearing a sapphire blue dress, and the sunlight shining on her made her look crystal clear. 3 years later, her beauty is still heart-pounding. She smiled and handed the flowers to the bride, but never looked in my direction. I took a deep breath, turned to Linda, who had just arrived, and said, "My friend is here, let's go in." Linda's face instantly turned cold. "You are here to attend the wedding. Why did you trick me into coming here for dinner?" "Don't go." I hurriedly grabbed her hand. "You're here, what's wrong with having a meal?" This is also sincere, not deceiving. She struggled to leave and said angrily, "You are such a liar and scum. From today on, you move out of my house immediately." We were pulling each other, and suddenly, Emmy appeared in front of us. 3 years later, I finally stood face to face with her. At that moment, time seemed to stop, and my heart beat violently like a drum. Everything is inevitable after all. Chapter 18. Deep Confession. By the fountain, the sound of water drowned out each other's breathing. Linda, Emmy, and I stood there like a pantomime. No one spoke, until Emmy smiled softly and broke the silence. "Long time no see, Max." "Yeah." I tried to be brief. fearing that saying one more word would reveal my inner trembling. 3 years of separation made me feel overwhelmed, especially when she was still as elegant and charming as before. Emmy glanced at me, still holding Linda's hand, and asked calmly, "Is she your girlfriend?" I was stunned, and after a few seconds I nodded. "Yes, she's my girlfriend." This was a lie I told subconsciously, to prove that I could live well without her, at least on the surface. Linda glanced at me, frowning slightly, as if considering whether to expose me. Finally, she shook her hand coldly, broke free from my grasp, turned and walked towards her car without leaving a word. The red Audi Q7 whizzed past, stirring up a gust of wind, leaving me standing there, facing Emmy. She looked at me, smiling as always, but I felt as if the scars in my heart were being exposed. "Your girlfriend looks nice." Emmy's voice was calm, without any disturbance. I smiled bitterly and was about to respond when the best man Xiang Chen called out to Emmy from afar, saying that the MC was looking for her to cooperate with a wedding segment. I'll finish my cigarette. I made up an excuse and watched Emmy leave with mixed feelings. 3 years ago, when she left, I could only watch her leave from afar. The two words "wait" she wrote on the car window became the pain I recalled over and over again in the past 3 years. And today, I stood behind her again, like a bystander, watching her walk towards another turning point in her life. At the wedding banquet, I sat down in a corner. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't avoid Emmy. She was chatting with Xiang Chun very happily, smiling from time to time, and I could only calm my inner disappointment by drinking more and more. Xiang Chun suddenly came to me, holding up a glass of wine, and said with a smile, "Come on, I'm going to drink you down today." He smiled, but his eyes were provocative. I knew he was not joking, and his glass of wine was not only for celebration, but also for some kind of oath. "Come on, whoever lies down today will be the grandson." I raised my glass and drank it all. Everyone laughed, but no one knew the heaviness in my heart. This drinking game was no longer a game of youth, but a contest of winning and losing. The winner might get Emmy. Xiang Chen drank the wine generously, then walked towards Emmy, holding her hand with tenderness in his eyes. Suddenly, he borrowed a microphone and confessed in front of the whole audience. "Emmy, I love you, and it has never changed in the past 5 years. You were with Max before, and I silently wished you well, but now, I hope you can be my girlfriend. I am willing to give everything for you. Even if you go to the ends of the earth, I will follow you." His confession was like a sharp knife piercing my chest. I realized that Xiang Chun had been waiting for this opportunity, waiting for him to stand beside Emmy, and I had long been left in the depths of his memory. The air was terribly quiet, and everyone held their breath, waiting for Emmy's answer. My heart ached, as if I knew what she would say. She and Xiang Chun were the most suitable couple, and I had long lost the qualification to stand by her side. Emmy took a deep breath and finally raised her head. I closed my eyes, and I seemed to hear the two words "wait" she wrote on the car window that day. But now, it's no longer me who is waiting. Chapter 19, Castle in the Sky. The sound of the fountain surrounded us. Linda, Emmy, and I stood in this strange situation, and no one spoke. Until Emmy broke the silence, smiled, and said to me, "Long time no see, Max." I nodded and responded stiffly, "Yeah." My heart was beating irregularly. I was afraid that she could hear the fluctuations in my heart, and that she could see through my disguised calmness. Emmy's eyes fell on the hands of Linda and I, and she smiled slightly. "Is this your girlfriend?" I was stunned. The sweat on my palms made my grip seem particularly unnatural. I knew I couldn't let Emmy see how miserable I had been in the past few years. I didn't let go of Linda's hand, but nodded subconsciously. "Yes, she's my girlfriend." Emmy smiled and said nothing more. I turned to look at Linda, feeling nervous, afraid that she would expose my lie in front of me. But Linda just looked at me coldly without saying a word. I quickly said to her, "Don't you have something to do with the company? Go and do it. I will explain it to them." Linda pulled her hand back, turned around, and walked quickly towards her car without saying a word. The red Audi Q7 drove away, and her indifference and anger filled the air. And I, standing in front of Emmy, seemed to have lost my soul. Smoking a cigarette, I pretended to smile indifferently. "She is too busy at work, it's always like this." Emmy didn't answer, but her eyes fell on me, as if she wanted to see through the secrets in my heart. At this moment, the best man Xiang Chen came over and called her, saying that the MC was looking for her. She glanced at me and said calmly, "The luncheon is about to start. Aren't you going in? I'll go after I finish this cigarette. I responded, watching her leave. My heart felt like it was torn apart. The future we had dreamed of together all those years has now become a broken memory. She left, but I was left in the ruins of this memory, unable to extricate myself. At the wedding banquet, I tried hard not to look at Emmy, but I couldn't help but sneak a glance in her direction. She was sitting in the front row, chatting with Seong Chun, smiling from time to time. That smile hurt my heart, as if she had completely forgotten me. Suddenly, Seong Chun came to my table, holding a glass of wine. I knew what he was going to do. This was no longer the drinking competition we had in college. He took a sip of wine and walked towards Emmy. Then, he took out an exquisite gift box from his pocket. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight shone on the two of them. Emmy, this is the crystal diamond necklace I prepared for you. I named it Love to represent my most sincere feelings for you. Seong Chen's voice echoed in the silence. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Emmy's response. My heart ached as I watched all this. Finally, Emmy nodded slightly, and Seong Chen put the necklace on her, and warm applause and cheers broke out all around. I stood up silently, left the noisy wedding banquet, and walked out into the sunlight. The sunlight was bright and dazzling. I held onto the pillar and looked up at the sky with a wry smile. The city that once belonged to Emmy and I had now disappeared without a trace in the sunlight. Finally, I sat down by the moat, staring at the water in a trance. The past and the present intertwined into an inescapable picture. Emmy no longer belonged to me, and I, perhaps, never really owned her. When Linda finally appeared in front of me, I was already drunk and unconscious. She looked at me coldly, but still sat next to me and put on her coat. It seemed that a corner of my heart was filled by her. But at this moment, I couldn't say anything. Chapter 20, Castle in the Sky 2. I stood on the guardrail facing the night wind, trying to see the castle in the sky in my dream from the river, but I could only see the lights reflected on the water like fragments. The fear of death suddenly came over me, and I was afraid to really jump in, afraid to be swallowed by the darkness of the moat. I turned to look at Linda. She was standing aside with an indifferent expression. Aren't you going to persuade me? I asked with a frown. Why should I advise you? She responded coldly. But if I jump down, I will really die, I said with a hint of despair in my voice. It's you who died, not me. Linda's expression remained calm, as if she was discussing the weather. I jumped down from the guardrail, furious. I was right about you. You are a vicious woman. In order to achieve your own goals, you don't even care about human life. I have no purpose. You said you wanted to jump. She responded indifferently. I became even angrier and pointed at her. Can you please stop being so cold? I called you hoping you would persuade me not to jump. According to the script, I said, you should play your role well. Linda finally seemed to show a trace of impatience. You called me to ask me to persuade you, but you were drunk and unconscious, lying here like a dead person. I came here to collect your body, not to persuade you. Her words angered me, and the grievance in my heart made the pain left by the alcohol surge up again. I lay on the guardrail and vomited violently. The sourness in my stomach mixed with the strong liquor I drank at noon. I was in a mess and leaned on the guardrail exhausted, my eyes blurred by tears. Linda stood aside, her expression still cold. She handed over a tissue and said with a touch of relief, You cried. Wipe your tears. I didn't take the tissue. I raised my head to let the wind dry my tears. After a moment of silence, I whispered, Actually, this has nothing to do with you. The pain is your own. Living is much harder than dying. Linda listened quietly, and after a moment she said, I don't understand this, but I just hope you won't lie to me again. Her voice finally softened. Yes, I'm an asshole, but you don't know that I once had a clean city in my heart. I laughed softly. Now it has disappeared and become an unreachable castle in the sky. Linda seemed touched by my words and asked, What exactly is that city in the sky you're talking about? I smiled bitterly and said, It's a crystal clear city that makes people forget all worries and pains. When you live in it, you will feel free, like a bird flying in the wind, without any constraints. Linda was silent for a while, then asked softly, But the bird will eventually fall to the ground. Will it still be crystal clear after it falls to the ground? I shook my head and didn't answer. That night, Linda didn't leave me. We sat in the car in silence, driving back to that illusory and prosperous city. I knew that after this night, I would move out of that old house, fulfill her wish, and give myself a new start. But on the way home, I still kept in my heart the castle in the sky, that I could never return to? Chapter 21. The Meaning of a Cockroach. That night, when Linda and I walked side by side to the corridor, we saw Tom's. He was wearing an old windbreaker and sitting quietly on the steps with his black briefcase that he had used for decades next to him. Tom's, why didn't you call me? The temperature has dropped so much today. It must be so cold for you sitting here, I said with some concern. I called, but your phone is turned off. Tom's answered in his usual dull tone, still without a trace of emotion. It was then that I remembered that I had thrown my cell phone into the moat when I was drunk in the afternoon. I felt a pang of pain in my heart. The little money I had saved with great difficulty was squandered in this way. I was really hopeless. Linda walked up to Tom's and said with a smile, "Good evening, Uncle." Tom's nodded slightly and responded with a smile. "Hello, too. You haven't eaten yet, right? I bought some vegetables at the supermarket, and we'll cook a meal for you when I get back." He picked up the bag in his hand, which contained fresh fish and vegetables. "Uncle, the porridge you cooked last time was very delicious. You must be a good cook, too." Linda had a rare smile on her face. I rarely see her with such an expression, which always makes me feel that she is cold in front of me. But now, she can treat Tom so kindly. Tom smiled and asked us to go upstairs. He and I walked behind while Linda walked slowly in front. "Tom's, you haven't been back to your hometown these days?" I asked with some surprise. "I went to Guangzhou to attend an exhibition and passed by Suzhou on my way back." He still answered briefly, as taciturn as usual. After returning home, Tom's went straight into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Linda wanted to help, but was politely rejected by Tom's. She went back to her room, leaving me alone in a daze. Everything that happened today was still rolling in my mind, especially MES figure, which was lingering. Not long after, Linda came out in her home clothes. Although she changed her clothes, she was still radiant. She picked up the laundry basket and walked into the bathroom. I watched her disappear behind the door, feeling a little helpless. Even a goddess has to wash clothes. Suddenly, a scream broke the silence. Linda's voice came from the bathroom. Tom's and I rushed over immediately, only to see Linda hiding by the bathtub with a horrified look on her face, while her opponent, a cockroach, was shaking its antennae leisurely. Tom's rushed in with a spoon, and I walked over with a smile and picked up the cockroach. Linda quickly hid behind me, looking terrified. "Would you like to add a dish? Stir fry or steam the cockroaches?" I joked, making Linda feel sick. Tom's glared at me helplessly and whispered, "Stop it, throw it away." I threw the cockroach out of the window and couldn't help laughing in my heart. This little bug could scare Linda, who was always so calm, into this state. The washing machine continued to run, and I sat in the bathtub, thinking about how to tell Linda that I was moving out. As she took clothes out of the washing machine, I finally said, "I'm moving out tomorrow." "I know," she answered coldly, as if she had been prepared for it. "Won't you feel lonely when you're alone?" "Why should I be lonely?" "Oh, of course not. After all, you still have cockroaches to play hide and seek with you," I teased. Her expression instantly turned cold, so I had to change the subject angrily. "Hurry up and hang the clothes. Dinner will be ready soon." At dinner, Tom's prepared a table full of delicious dishes, especially the sweet and sour fish, which was a must-try. Linda ate with gusto, and Tom's asked her, "Girl, do you like the food?" "Uncle, the food you cook is so delicious," Linda praised. Tom smiled and seemed to be very satisfied with the meal. I was thinking about leaving tomorrow. This might be the last meal for Linda and I. Chapter 22. Opportunities for Promotion. After dinner, Linda and I walked Tom's out of the community. His hotel was just across the street, and he had to leave tomorrow morning. I asked, "Tom's, when will you come to Suzhou next time?" "Come when you have time. I'll bring you some rice and flour next time." Tom's emphasized you when he answered, which made me feel helpless. In fact, the next time he came, I would no longer live in Linda's house. For me, every time he came, I felt endless guilt because I still hadn't accomplished anything. Tom's reminded me, "Remember to fix the leaking water pipe." I nodded and watched him leave with a feeling of loss in my heart. Today, Leo and Haley got married. Emmy became Xiang Chen's girlfriend, and I, however, fell into such a state that I would rather not mention it. When I got home, I found the toolbox and fixed the leaking pipe. I also checked other places. After making sure everything was okay, I went into the room and started packing. While I was busy, Linda appeared at the door and asked, "Is the pipe fixed?" "Yeah, it's all done. If you have any problems at home in the future, call me and I'll help you fix it," I replied, putting the guitar into the case. Linda glanced at me and said calmly, "There are still cockroaches. Do you have any way to get rid of them? I smiled and pretended to be relaxed. You can drive me away, but are you afraid that you can't drive away the cockroaches? Linda ignored my joke and went back to her room. I continued to pack my luggage, but I felt empty inside. I sat on the bed, lit a cigarette, thought about it, and decided not to light it. At least, I would not break my promise this time. I put the cigarette back in the cigarette box, lay on my back on the bed, looked at the ceiling, and forced those things I didn't want to think about to be suppressed in my heart. The next day, I went to work on time as usual. Today, I had to have the final negotiation with the Gucci representative. Whether the mall could introduce this international brand would determine Leo's career and also my future. Standing in the mall square with Ms. Zhao, a representative of Gucci, she suddenly stopped in front of a set of promotional posters. Kelly took the photo. "That's a nice model," she said. I casually agreed. Her image and temperament are indeed in line with the international brand positioning, but she is currently filming in Hongdian, and I'm afraid she won't be back in the short term. Miss Zhao's face turned cold. "I don't want to hear 'I'm afraid.' You need to contact her as soon as possible. Otherwise, we may consider other partners." I was very upset, but I had to hold back my anger. Soon after I returned to the office, my manager called and ordered me to come over immediately. "Don't you understand the situation?" the manager asked coldly. "Gucci is the 8th international brand we have introduced. It is crucial to the upgrade of the mall. If something goes wrong at this time, the entire planning department will be held responsible." I still responded calmly. "Manager, even if you fire me, I can't guarantee that she will be able to make time." Chun Jingming's eyes turned cold. "You may not know yet, but the board of directors attaches great importance to this project. If it is successfully implemented, Leo will be promoted to deputy manager of the planning department, and you may very likely replace him as the leader of the copywriting planning team." His last words struck me like a thunderbolt, and my head buzzed. What did this mean? It meant that I had a chance to truly gain a foothold in this city, instead of drifting aimlessly. All my anxiety and unwillingness seemed to have found a breakthrough at this moment. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Maybe this time, I really can't escape anymore. Chapter 23. Pay Your Debts. When it comes to Leo and my own promotion opportunities, I carefully weighed the pros and cons in my mind. Actually, I am fine, but it is mainly Leo. If he can really be promoted to deputy manager of the planning department, his salary and status in the company will have a qualitative leap, and his future will be bright. Max, if you can't handle this matter, I will let Leo come back to take care of it, and he won't have to take his wedding leave. Chun Jingming looked at me with a coercive expression and said, "No, manager, I can't handle him, and he's not familiar with the print model." Chun Jingming softened his tone and said to me, "In fact, we are about to sign the contract. I guess Gucci is just using the incident of the print model to test our company's sincerity and cooperation. Even if this incident doesn't happen, they will probably create other emergencies. Whether Gucci will set up a counter in our department store is not only related to the interests of the company, but also to the interests of our planning department, including yourself. So, no matter what method you think of, you must help the company get through this last hurdle." After weighing the pros and cons in my mind for a while, I finally nodded and said, "I'll do my best." "It's not enough to just try your best. You have to get it done. You have to promise me this." Chun Jingming adjusted his glasses, and there was no room for negotiation in his tone. "This matter must be done regardless of success or failure." Now I can only hope that Kelly can make time for it. After weighing the pros and cons, I nodded and said, "I will definitely get this done." Chun Jingming finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's great." I thought to myself, "You're fine. I have to shamelessly ask for help from a woman I least want to ask for help from. Do you fucking know that?" When I was about to leave, Chun Jingming stopped me again. "Max, don't call the model yet. Isn't she filming in Hongdian? Go directly to Hongdian tomorrow. If you come all the way there and tell her about this in person, it will be difficult for her to refuse. The manager is thoughtful and wise," I said with a forced smile, but no matter how I looked at him, I felt that he was a shameless old fox. He was doing such a desperate thing. But had he ever thought about how others would feel if they couldn't arrange their schedule, but it was difficult to refuse? This evening after work, I sat on the bus on my way back, feeling irritated. The source of my irritation was that I had to go to Hongdian to meet Kelly tomorrow, and tonight I had to move out of the house where I had lived for 2 years. My irritation then turned into depression. It seemed that I could never decide my own life. Often, a few words from others would shatter my love, work, and life, such as Emmy, the female representative of Gucci, and Linda. Returning to the old house, I subconsciously looked towards Linda's room. Her door was still closed, so she might not have returned home yet. Whether she comes home or not has nothing to do with me. All I have to do now is keep my promise and move out of this house forever. I went back to my room and started packing my luggage again. Actually, I had almost finished packing yesterday. I just packed some bedding, and that was it. After packing my things, I turned on my computer and searched the local internet for a house that I could move into right away. I found a few that met my requirements, but all of them required half a year's rent and a deposit of 3 months. After I calculated, I had to prepare at least 10,000 yuan in rent. I was immediately in trouble. I only had a few thousand yuan left on me, and last month's salary would not be paid until the day after tomorrow. Even if I did, I couldn't use it all to pay the rent. I had to keep some for living expenses. In desperation, I had to lower my requirements and start looking for a house that I could share and that had a relatively lower rent. Time passed quietly, and when I came to my senses, the city was already ablaze with lights at night. I wiped my face heavily to relieve the fatigue from sitting in front of the computer for a long time. After resting for a while, I have to continue looking for a place to live. I can't really live on the streets. I'm already poor enough. I looked out the window blankly. My soul was lonely again in the lights of thousands of houses. At this moment, I really wanted to have a house of my own in this city where I had lived for more than 2 years, and a woman who would wait for me to go home every day so that I could say goodbye to homelessness, loneliness at night, and the sadness of living. After a while, I heard the sound of a door opening outside the house. I knew it was Linda coming back, but at this moment I could face her with peace of mind because I finally did not break my promise to her, and I would move out of here soon. Linda stood at my door with her handbag in her hand and slippers. She looked at the packed luggage and asked me, "Have you found a house?" "Don't worry. Whether you find it or not, I will move out tonight." I replied, subconsciously thinking that Linda would like this answer very much. "Oh." Linda responded, but did not leave. After a moment, he seemed to remember something and asked me, "You said you would buy some insecticide powder to sprinkle in the bathroom today. Did you buy it?" Compared to moving, buying insecticide powder, and being forced by my boss to go to Hongdian to find Kelly was too trivial, so I really ignored it. I apologized to Linda and said, "I'm sorry, I forgot. Go buy some yourself. If you don't want to run, you can buy them online. It's very convenient." Linda's expression turned unhappy. "This is what you promised me. How can you be so irresponsible? I've been feeling frustrated all day, and I still haven't found a suitable house to live in. How can I be in a good mood?" My tone has become serious. "Can a sense of responsibility be eaten? Don't you get tired of talking to me like this every day?" Linda didn't expect my reaction to be so intense. After a pause, she frowned and nodded and said to me, "Okay, pay me back the money you owe me, and I don't have to be responsible for you." I was speechless for a long time, and once again fell into the sorrow of being penniless. After a long while, I said in a lower voice, "You said that as long as I move out, I don't have to rush to pay back the money I borrowed from you. Who cares about you? It's only natural to pay back your debts." Linda still said to me with a cold face, "After all, we have lived under the same roof for several days. Is it necessary to drive me to a dead end like this?" I sat with my head down, not knowing what to feel in my heart. Linda smiled disdainfully and said, "I didn't push you to a dead end. You've been working for many years, right? How come you don't have any savings? You should understand that you are the one who pushed you to a dead end." Linda's words ruthlessly uncovered the most painful scar in my heart. In an instant, I felt so inferior and ashamed that I felt embarrassed. At a loss, I saw the guitar that I had placed in the corner. This guitar was specially made by Emmy in a guitar shop on my birthday, and then given to me as a birthday present. It was made of very good materials and was worth far more than 10,000 yuan. Looking at this guitar, I once again felt the sadness of how things and people have changed. I stood up and took the guitar to Linda, handed it to her, and said, "This guitar is for you to pay off your debt. If you sell it to someone who knows the business, it will definitely be worth more than 10,000. Without waiting for Linda to express whether she agreed to use the guitar to pay off the debt, I had already dragged my luggage, not even daring to look at the house again, and walked out with my head lowered. Chapter 24: The Price of Growth. Far away from the old neighborhood, I dragged my luggage along the city streets. After walking for a long time, I finally found a stone bench to rest on in a square. I put my luggage on the side of the stone bench, lit a cigarette, and sat down, looking at the flashing neon lights attached to the tall buildings, and a panic surged in my heart, not knowing where to go. Hurrying to avoid the light and shadow of the city, I looked up at the sky, looking for this city in the sky that had been separated from my body. I don't know when a group of square dancing Annies holding fans came to the square, and the sound of music immediately drowned me out. I couldn't see the sky city clearly in the suffocation. Maybe it had been hidden behind the moon for a long time, or maybe it had been blown away by the passing wind just now. But this night, I have to find a place to rest in this city. I took out my cell phone from my pocket and called Robin. He lived near the train station. I was going to Hongjian by train tomorrow, so I decided to stay with him that night. Amid the noise, Robin answered the phone. Max, is there anything you need from me? Still performing at the bar? Yes, it will be our band's turn soon. Oh, I want to stay at your place for one night. Is that convenient? Robin smiled and said, if it's inconvenient, come to the bar now and wait for me to get off work, and then we can go back together. I'll just go to your place instead of going to the bar. Come on, I'll treat you to a drink. I have several coupons here. I really am not going, I said and hung up the phone, leaving Robin with the question of why I was not going. After leaving the square, I took a taxi directly to Robin's residence. Seeing that it was still early, I went to the train station and bought a train ticket from Suzhou to Yiwu for tomorrow morning. It was almost midnight when Robin came back from the bar, and I had already fallen asleep in the corridor leaning against my luggage. Robin woke me up and complained, "You've changed recently. You didn't want to go to the bar and would rather sleep in the hallway and wait." I just smiled without saying anything. Robin opened the door and asked me, "Have you moved?" "Yeah, I haven't found a suitable house yet, and I have to go on a business trip to Hengdian tomorrow, so I might as well stay at your place for one night." "Stay any time is fine." He then looked at the luggage on the ground and asked, "Where's your awesome guitar?" I felt depressed. After all, this was a guitar that had accompanied me for many years, but I said to Robin as if nothing had happened, "Take it to pay off the debt." Robin widened his eyes and sighed. "Pay off debts? How miserable are you? I asked you to borrow money several times before, but you treated it like a treasure and refused to lend it to me. You actually used it to pay off debts. Don't mention it. Help me get my luggage in." Robin lives in a small attic on the top floor. It is just a narrow room. There is a large balcony behind the house. There is a bathroom shared by many people and a clothesline on the balcony. The living environment is not good. When I turned on the lights, I first saw a few leather jackets hanging on the clothes hangers, a guitar in the corner, a few pairs of Martin boots on the shoe rack, and a few boxes. There were no other unnecessary decorations except for the beer cans scattered on the table. It wasn't too messy. After putting the luggage in place, Robin took out 2 buckets of instant noodles from somewhere and made one for me and one for himself as a midnight snack. After a short while, the empty box of instant noodles was turned upside down on the abandoned flower pot under the balcony. The two of them put a few cans of beer beside them and sat on the balcony railing. We each opened a can of beer. Robin and I clinked glasses, raised our heads, and immediately drank half the beer. "Max, I see you've been quite depressed lately. What's happened to you? Why haven't you even gone to the bar?" "I live a free and easy life. How can I be affected by this?" I said and drank the remaining beer in the can in one gulp, but looked into the distance blankly. In the distance, the lights adorning Maxwell's giant billboard still flickered in the wee hours of the night. Robin did not ask any more questions and followed my gaze into the distance. After a long time, he patted my shoulder with empathy. We are all marginalized people struggling in this city. Some of the pain is shared, and there is no need to explain it too clearly. The wind whistled past us with the chill of the night. Robin and I continued to sit on the guardrail, looking out and drinking another can of beer. On a quiet night, people always think more. Robin seemed to think of someone and opened another can of beer, but I stopped him. Drinking too much is not good after all. I almost jumped into the moat yesterday because I drank too much. Missing about women? I asked Robin with a smile. "Yeah, I think about it after drinking some wine," Robin said frankly. I knew Robin had a girlfriend whom he loved deeply, so I nudged him and said, "Do you still have the photo of your girlfriend? Take it out and have a look." Robin took out his wallet from his pocket, pulled out a photo from the compartment, and handed it to me. I could see the woman in the photo clearly in the light from a distance. She had good facial features and was a very intellectual and elegant woman. Robin was a little absent-minded, and after a long while he said to me, "It's been almost 3 years since we broke up, and she should be married now. Why did you break up?" Robin smiled sadly. She was born in a teacher's family. Her parents are both university professors. They come from a family of scholars. I am a musician with no stable income. I live day by day. I don't want to delay her. "So you ran away from Beijing to Suzhou without telling her?" Robin nodded, and after a long while he said, "Actually, she later pursued me to Suzhou, and we lived together for another half a year." "Then why did you break up?" I asked, somewhat puzzled. "Her parents came to me and told me that they had arranged a job for her at a university in Beijing and asked me to let her go back to Beijing." "You little idiot. Are you really going to let him go?" Robin nodded. "Let her go. I told her I have another woman." "Can she believe it?" Robin smiled and said, "She definitely doesn't believe it. That, I found a lady, right here in this room, in front of her." Robin didn't say anything else, still with a smile on his face. But underneath this smile, I saw a dead heart. I sighed heavily and said, "Why do you have to do things so drastically? If I don't do this, she won't leave. It's better to suffer a short pain than a long one." Robin tilted his head back and drank the beer in the can in one gulp, but some of the beer flowed down his neck into his lapel. I was silent. Even though Robin said it lightly, I saw a heart-wrenching love and helplessness. I knew Robin would never forget that woman in his life. "Don't talk about me. Take out the photo of your girlfriend and look at it." Robin pushed me and said, "MES photo," from the compartment of my wallet, and handed it to Robin. "In fact, we are all reluctant to forget the past because it is too precious." Emmy in the photo by the burning flame. "Your girlfriend is beautiful, not just ordinary beautiful." When I heard the word beautiful, suddenly the face of my female tenant appeared in my mind again, but this did not surprise me because I had never seen a woman more beautiful than Linda in my life. In just a moment, I came back to reality. While the flame was still burning, I looked at the familiar, yet unfamiliar face of Emmy in the photo. My heart ached, and I thought, it won't be long before she and Xiangqin will marry each other. Robin returned Emmy's photo to me and asked, "What about you? Why did you break up?" I recalled for a long time and said, "She called me and broke up with me a year after she went to the United States." "Why did she break up with you?" Robin asked. "I don't know, she didn't say." I replied with the same smile as Robin just now. "You didn't ask either?" I nodded. I indeed didn't ask Emmy why she wanted to break up with me, because I thought, if Emmy wanted to say it, she would tell me without me asking. Or maybe in my subconscious, I didn't believe that we could go to the end and that we would break up one day. But what's the use of asking for a result that was within my expectations? "Aren't you afraid that there might be some misunderstanding between you?" Robin reminded me. I was stunned for a moment and said, "What kind of misunderstanding could there be? Love is just a passing cloud. Let's not talk about it anymore. Go get the guitar, let's sing a song, and forget all that nonsense." Robin brought a guitar from the house, tested the tune, and asked me, "Do you want to use your key or mine?" Casual. Robin plucked the guitar strings, and a melody floated in the night sky. It was The Price of Love by Jonathan Lee. Go, go. People always have to learn to grow up. Go, go. Life is bound to experience pain and struggle. Go, go. Find a home for your heart. I have cried and been heartbroken. This is the price of love. Maybe I will miss her occasionally, and I will inevitably think about her occasionally. Just treat her as an old friend. It also makes me feel distressed and worried. But there is no spark in my heart anymore. Let the past go with the wind. The song floated out from our mouths, full of vicissitudes, but I didn't understand whether the price of love was just sad tears and heartbreak. But I knew. The price of growing up is the love that has passed away in the flow of time. In this late night, when I should have seen through everything, I still regret my lost love and regret for Robin and that nameless Beijing girl. The next morning, I took a train to Yiwu. After arriving in Yiwu, I had to transfer to Hongdian. I knew that I should do something for myself. If Kelly could agree to come back and help Gucci shoot the opening promotional posters, my career would usher in the first progress in my life. With the promotion to team leader of the planning copywriting group, my monthly salary will exceed 10,000 yuan, and perhaps my life will become more stable. Sitting on the southbound train, I said to myself for the first time, "Work hard, Max. Don't let anyone look down on you again." Chapter 25, Night in Dream Valley. The train arrived in Yiwu at noon. I had a quick lunch at the station and then took the express train to Hongdian. I finally arrived at Hongdian town at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, found a family hotel on Wanqing North Street, and stayed there. Then I dialed the phone number Kelly left for me. Maybe Kelly was busy with the drama at the time and didn't answer my call. I sent her another text message, telling her that I was in Hongdian and asked her to pick me up as soon as possible. Kelly didn't reply to my text message for a long time, and I didn't feel like going out. I just lay on the bed in the hotel and read a magazine. The window of my room faces west. After a while, I saw the setting sun. The sunlight was lying softly on the quilt beside me. The air was full of laziness. I yawned and fell asleep in a moment. When I woke up, it was already dark. Kelly finally replied to my message. She asked me to meet her in the Imperial Garden in the Ming and Qing palaces. Their crew was filming there. Several big names were also filming that day, and she asked me to get their autographs for her. Actually, I really wanted to go, but I didn't have much cash on me, and I had to go back to get the travel expenses reimbursed. It was a waste to spend more than 100 yuan to go in and meet some big names. I could only reply to her message with regret and tell her I would wait for her outside the scenic area. At sunset, there are still many extras squatting outside the scenic area waiting to be called by the crew. Their numb eyes reveal longing. I really see the hardships of life in them, but no one is born to live in such agony. But there are so many people struggling and suffering, like me and these waiting extras. I squatted next to an extra, chatting with him to relieve my fatigue while waiting for Kelly. The sky gradually darkened. I saw several cars from the crew driving out of the scenic area, but there was still no sign of Kelly. I couldn't help but wonder in my heart, this damn woman. Is there going to be a night scene tonight? While I was wondering, I saw Kelly at the entrance. She was wearing a Qing Dynasty court costume. It seemed that she had not had time to change into her costume. She was standing at the ticket service counter looking around. I stood up and walked towards Kelly. She finally noticed me and ran towards me with a smile. Kelly took my arm and said with relief, I finally traveled back in time. I took away her hand from my arm and said, Princess, please respect yourself. Kelly took my arm again and asked happily, Xiao Yangzi, tell me the truth. Why did you come all the way to Hengdian to see me? Definitely not to be your consort. I pushed Kelly aside again. Then I'll send you to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to be a eunuch. Kelly pinched my waist and said this, but she still had a smile on her face and seemed to be in a good mood. I felt pain from her pinching, so I sternly reprimanded her. Stop making trouble, act well, and be a good person. What will happen if you don't behave well? My face fell, and I said, fuck you. Kelly laughed and said, Max, I like to see you look serious but say rude things. I accompanied Kelly to her hotel to change clothes, and then we strolled on Wanqing North Street. Although Kelly has not yet become famous in the entertainment industry, passers-by still cast their eyes on her. I think it is only a matter of time before she becomes famous. She is not only beautiful, but also looks like a star, and her acting skills are superb. At least I have had the misfortune to experience that. At this time, I did not mention the purpose of this trip to Kelly. I always felt that it would be a very embarrassing and mood-destroying thing for her. It would be better to enjoy the relaxation and freedom before the night comes. It was my first time in Hengdian, and I couldn't help looking around as I walked down the street. Kelly, however, was only interested in some of the street snacks and kept asking me what I wanted to eat. As the crowd walked to the end of the street, Kelly suddenly pulled me to the side, pointed to a barbecue restaurant on the street, and said, Max, let's go eat barbecue. I looked at the barbecue restaurant and saw that it was packed with people. I said, there are too many people. Let's eat somewhere else. The more people there are, the better the food is. Don't you know? This barbecue restaurant is very famous. When Fan Bingbing came to Hengdian to film, she waited in line for more than 20 minutes just to try the barbecue here. Kelly said as she dragged me towards the store. Wait 20 minutes. Is Fan Bingbing so stupid? I stood there and refused to leave. It wasn't that I was against eating barbecue. I just didn't want to wait. She's not stupid. She's a foodie. Kelly corrected me. I still refused to move. Kelly suddenly looked behind me with excitement and shouted, Hey, it's Fan Bingbing. I turned my head subconsciously, and Kelly took the opportunity to drag me into the store with brute force, and then laughed at me. Look at your eager look at your head. Is your neck twisted? I would be happy if it was really Fan Bingbing who twisted it. I glared at Kelly, but was fooled by her acting again. You're useless, Kelly said as she pushed me down on the chair and went to queue up to order. During the meal, night had quietly arrived. Kelly and I drank Sprite and ate barbecue. We all had a good appetite. I took another big sip of Sprite, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and asked Kelly, I ate so much. Why didn't I taste the flavor of Fan Bingbing? Kelly looked at me with disdain and replied, You are stupid. You are eating barbecue, not grilled Fan Bingbing. I was speechless for a while, then said, Just think I didn't ask. Kelly smiled at me proudly and said, I love to see you being helpless against me. Eat quickly, and then we'll go for a walk in Dream Valley. At 7:30 in the evening, Kelly and I arrived at Dream Valley, one of the attractions in Hengdian. When we entered the scenic area, we found that it was almost a world of light and shadow at night. Although it was not the peak tourist season, it was still very lively. Kelly and I walked around and finally sat on the wooden bench under the Ferris wheel to rest. I closed my eyes to rest, not liking the dim lights here. When I opened my eyes, I found that Kelly also had her eyes closed. I nudged Kelly and asked, "Why are you closing your eyes?" Kelly still closed her eyes but answered with a longing expression. I imagine this place as a stage surrounded by lights, and I am a star standing in the center of the stage. I have always known what Kelly's dream is, and I also know how important opportunity is to a newcomer who graduated from a film school. In fact, purely in terms of pursuit, Kelly and I are very different. So she likes the blurred light and shadow here, while I am fascinated by the crystal clearness of that city. The Ferris wheel was still spinning in the air with all kinds of people on it, and I was a little mesmerized by it. I don't know when Kelly took my arm and snuggled in my arms, and I was a little dazed as I indulged in her rare tenderness. "It's nice to be with you," Kelly said softly, leaning closer to me again. This time, I didn't push Kelly away. In fact, it was nice to have her lean on me like this. At this moment, there was no overflowing lust for me, but only the warmth of relying on each other. I seemed to be very dependent on this warmth, and I hugged Kelly tightly. The faint scent of her perfume was inhaled into my lungs along with the coolness of the night. I was dazed again during the brief moment of clarity. A drop of warm tears fell on my hand. Kelly hugged me tighter and said to me with sobs, "Max, I'm really tired and helpless here. I have to look at other people's faces every day. I am afraid of the unspoken rules, and I am afraid of the intrigues in the crew. Only when I lean on your arms can I feel relied on." Kelly's words made me feel a little panicked. I was already shaky in the wind and rain, so how could I be relied upon? Kelly's face with my hands. Apart from lending her my body for support, there was nothing else I could do for her. The wind that had been blowing for a long time finally died down. Kelly left my body and looked at me and asked, "You must have something to ask me this time, right?" Chapter 26. Will we be together? The Ferris wheel behind me stopped turning, and another group of people got on. After a long while, I nodded under Kelly's gaze and said, "Well, I did have something to ask you and hung in this time." Kelly said with an expected expression, "You definitely won't come to me because you miss me, and you don't miss me at all." "Don't say that. It makes me feel like a villain. I only come to you when I have something to do." Kelly smiled and asked teasingly, "Have you missed me these days?" "Again." "Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Tell me, what do you want to talk to me about?" I was silent for a while before asking, "Do you have any schedule recently?" "The crew has just started filming, and there are basically scenes every day," Kelly replied. "So busy," I sighed. Kelly nodded and said, "Well, the recent rehearsal is very intensive. There are 2 night scenes tonight. I have to go back to the crew later and can't stay with you for too long." My heart skipped a beat, knowing that this time I would most likely return empty-handed. I didn't want to force Kelly, so after a moment of silence, I said to her, "Then you go back first. It's not something important that I came to see you about. If I don't have time, forget it." Kelly looked at her watch and said to me, "I have to go." I smiled and said, "Go ahead." Before leaving, Kelly asked me again, "Where do you live?" "Shaoli Inn." "Oh, then I'm leaving. Bye, Max." Kelly waved to me and trotted away. The Ferris wheel was still turning, but I suddenly felt alone. I lay on the bench and didn't want to go back to the hotel. Although I promised my boss that I would get this done, I didn't want to force Kelly. Since she really didn't have the schedule, I'll just leave it to fate. The reason why I gave up so easily was because I knew Kelly's situation. She was just a newcomer in the crew and often had to act according to other people's wishes. Moreover, it was really difficult for her to free up time when the crew was very busy. I couldn't let the crew stop work to accommodate her. In fact, I should be happy for Kelly. The fact that she can't free up her schedule just shows that she has a very important role in this drama. Maybe she can really become famous with this drama. After returning to the hotel, I took a hot bath, relieved some of my tiredness, and lay down on the bed. I couldn't help but worry about the career prospects of myself and Leo. I just hoped that Chun Jingming was making a fuss out of nothing, and Gucci would not necessarily stick to this matter and terminate the cooperation. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, and time had already passed into the early morning while I was still worried and thinking. The world gradually bid farewell to the hustle and bustle and fell into silence. I walked to the window, opened it, lit a cigarette, looked out at the gray sky, and once again emptied myself and didn't want to think about anything. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was from the next door, but when I listened carefully, I realized it was from my own room. I was a little confused, Logically, a private inn like this wouldn't have any special services. So who was outside the door so late at night? I looked through the peephole and found that the person standing outside the door was Kelly. I opened the door and Kelly smiled at me and said, "How is it? Surprised, right?" "It's just surprise, no joy." I was really surprised by Kelly. I never expected that she would come to me at this time. Kelly came into the house, put her cosmetics and toiletries in the bathroom, and said to me, "I came to see you right after I finished filming my scene. I'm staying at your place tonight." "Do you need it very much?" I asked, standing at the bathroom door. "Yes, but not tonight. You can't have sex for a month after an abortion. You should know this physiological common sense, Max," Kelly said to me while removing her makeup. "You just can't change your nature. You came here like a scoundrel. Have you ever thought about how hard it will be for me to go through this night? Think of a way to solve it yourself," Kelly said nonchalantly. I said nothing more. I was lying on the bed watching TV. Kelly washed up, got into bed in her pajamas, and lay down beside me. Then she leaned into my arms again, hugged me, and said, "Don't watch TV anymore." "I can't fuck you, so why don't you watch TV?" I continued to stare at the TV. Kelly found the remote control and turned off the TV. The room suddenly became quiet. She spoke to me seriously. "Tell me, what is the reason for you to come to see me this time?" "I told you it's not a big deal," I said, and went to get the remote control. "I'm not stupid. Is it worth it for you to rush all the way from Suzhou to Hongdian just to sleep with me for one night?" Kelly said and snatched the remote control from my hand again. "I'm not here to sleep with you, am I? Then stop wasting time and tell me why you came to see me." After Kelly's repeated questioning, I finally said, "Recently, Gucci is discussing with our department store about setting up a counter. A female representative from Gucci saw the promotional posters you took for our mall and thought that your image is very consistent with Gucci's product positioning. She hopes you can shoot a set of promotional posters for Gucci products to cooperate with the opening promotion." After that, I added, "If you can't arrange the opening time, forget it. Does your company attach great importance to the cooperation with Gucci? Our department store currently has 7 international first-line brands operating on-site, plus Gucci, which makes a total of 8. This reaches the standard of top-level Class B department stores, which means it has moved up a level. We attach great importance to it," I replied. "Look at you. I didn't ask, but you didn't say anything about such a big thing," Kelly said with some complaints in her tone. "If you really don't have time, it's useless for me to tell you. You should focus on your work first. There's really no need to force yourself." After a moment of silence, Kelly asked me, "How many days will it take to finish the shoot?" "It should be done in 2 days or maybe 1 day. I'm not sure how Gucci plans to shoot it yet." Kelly nodded and said, "That's fine. Actually, I've already told the director before I came here that I might need to take a leave. He said he could give me 2 days off. You could talk to Gucci and see when we can shoot." A weight suddenly fell from my heart, and I reminded Kelly, "Don't force it. It's okay to force it for you." The night was deep, and there was only a dim night light left in the room. Kelly was still curled up in my arms, and neither of us seemed sleepy. "Max, do you think we will be together?" I don't know why Kelly asked this all of a sudden. I was stunned for a long time before answering. "We are not from the same world. Your future is bright." I have always been muddling along. The reason we sleep together now is more out of emptiness and physiological needs. Maybe, since I started down this path, I no longer look forward to love. When I suddenly heard the word love, I felt it was so empty and so strange that I forgot for a moment that I was still talking to Kelly. We just fell into silence, feeling the helplessness of being alive. Even though we were sleeping together at the moment, we would not really live together because we were walking different paths, and one day we would go our separate ways and would not see each other anymore. "Kelly, let's not get along like this anymore, otherwise it will become a burden to us in the future," I finally said after a long time. Kelly hugged me again and was silent for a long time. Finally, she said calmly, "Well, after this night, let's be friends." Kelly and I slept in the same bed. She held me tightly the whole time and slept peacefully. I knew that what she needed was not a friend or a boyfriend, but just a support to keep herself from sinking in this heavy reality. What about me? Maybe what I need is a woman who can lead a decent life. I wish I could give my heart to her for comfort, but where is she? Remember, I have looked for her on the other side, but she was not there. I have looked for her in the dimly lit area, but she was not there either. Chapter 27. Don't let me see you in Suzhou. The next morning, I left Hongdian and returned to Suzhou in the afternoon. I went to the company first and reported the situation to the manager Qin Jingming. The incident of shooting promotional posters for Gucci was resolved with the promise Kelly made to me. That evening after get off work, I sat in the office for a long time without leaving. After leaving the house where I had lived for more than 2 years, the panic of having nowhere to go kept haunting me. In fact, habit is really a terrible thing. My current pain is entirely due to habit. I am used to the love Emmy once gave me, and I am used to the warmth and comfort that house once gave me. I don't understand what happened these years. Why do I always lose the most precious things in life but gain so little? Maybe I know the answer but don't want to admit it, so I comfort myself. Now I finally see some hope in my work, and progress in work will definitely make my future life better. So cheer up and get ready to embrace a new life. After leaving the company, I did not look for a new house. I decided to live with Robin for the time being. At least at night, two equally lonely and frustrated men could talk about music and this bullshit life. I was wandering the streets alone, feeling extremely bored, so I decided to go to the bar to find Robin and have a few more drinks. I immediately hailed a taxi and headed to the bar where Robin was performing. When I arrived at the bar, there were still the familiar lights and wine, and the same crowds of people shaking their waists. I just found a relatively quiet corner and sat down. Robin came over with a few bottles of beer, sat down opposite me, handed me another bottle of beer, and said, "I thought you were isolated from this place. Why are you here again?" I looked around and said jokingly, "Come here to breathe in some decadence. I've been living a little too complacently lately." Robin clinked his bottle with mine and asked with a smile, "You're just used to living a hard life. What's wrong with living a happy life?" I also smiled, raised the bottle, and said, "This is the realm of life. You have to slowly understand it. Little comrade, drink." Robin smiled and shrugged, then took a sip with me, and then asked me, "Did you go to Hungyen to see Kelly yesterday?" I kept it a secret so well. "How did you know?" I asked in surprise. "I chatted with Kelly on WeChat today, and she said you went." "Actually, I went to Hungyen for work. Gucci was going to set up a counter in our department store, and they specifically asked Kelly to take photos of their product promotional posters. So this tough job fell on me," I said, and took another sip of beer. "No wonder Kelly said she was so happy for nothing. She probably thought you came all the way to see her at first. Even if I were to go see her, it would take me a weekend." Robin nodded without asking any further questions. The two drank another bottle of beer and chatted for a few minutes. Then Robin left, as it was his turn to go on stage to perform. More and more people came to the bar to have fun. I still sat in the corner, drinking one sip after another, feeling dazed from time to time. Last night with Kelly appeared in my mind vaguely, and I felt sad. This sadness was incomprehensible to me, but it was real. On the stage, Robin and another resident female singer sang songs he had written. There was intermittent applause from the audience. My attention was finally drawn to it, and I snapped my fingers to the rhythm of the music. Robin is actually a very talented folk singer, but he is too proud of his principles. He is unwilling to write commercial pop songs or participate in popular talent shows. So he has been singing in bars in obscurity over the years and leading a hard life. However, he does not seem to care too much about this hardship. He often says, "Playing music does not necessarily mean becoming famous, but you must have persistence in your heart." Even though we have been together for many years, I still don't know what he insists on, but that doesn't affect my admiration for him. As the music played, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I continued, snapping my fingers to the rhythm. I took the phone out of my pocket and answered the call without looking at the number. The call was from Leo. He seemed to have heard the noise in the bar and said to me, "Max, are you hanging out in the bar again? Enjoy your honeymoon and don't worry about your buddies," I said, standing up from my chair and swaying with the crowd to the rhythm of the music. "Which bar are you in? I'll come find you." "Didn't you go to Sonya with Haley?" I asked puzzledly. "It's been raining heavily in Sonya these days. Let's go there in a few days." "Go in a few days. Will your wedding leave be enough?" "It won't take more than a few days. That's enough." "Stop talking nonsense, kid. Just tell me which bar you are in." "Soho bar. Come on over. I'll buy you a drink." "Then you need to prepare more money. Haley will also go, as well as Emmy and Seong Chun." When I heard the names of Emmy and Seong Chun, my heart trembled. After a long pause, I cursed, "You must have gotten married and become stupid. Why did you bring them here? Why are you so excited? The five of us haven't gotten together for years. Besides, you have a girlfriend now, so why don't you just call her out and get together? Don't think about the mess in the past." "Who told you that I have a girlfriend?" "Emmy, if you didn't have a girlfriend, I wouldn't bring Emmy and Seong Chun to make you unhappy. I know my limits." Then I remembered that on the day of Leo's wedding, I did lie to Emmy and said Linda was my girlfriend. I didn't expect that this lie would hit my feet like a rock I had lifted up, and I couldn't avoid it. While I was in a daze, Leo said to me, "Actually, it was Seong Chun who wanted to get together with you." We are all brothers who have been together since college. Don't let those emotional things make you unhappy. Now everyone is in pairs. Wouldn't it be nice to get together? I didn't know what to say, so I just remained silent. Leo reminded me again. Remember to ask your girlfriend out. I heard Emmy say she's incredibly beautiful. If Emmy thinks so, Haley and I really want to broaden our horizons. I was about to say something when Leo hung up the phone. I was stunned when I heard the beep sound coming from the phone. The bar was still noisy, but I was fidgeting. Leo had said so much, and I couldn't run away. The problem was that I had recklessly said that Linda was my girlfriend that day. But in that situation, I was really like a drowning man in need of a life-saving straw, so I could understand my behavior at that time. But what should I do now? After being at a loss for a long time, I finally decided to call Linda. If she still had any sense of loyalty, she would definitely help me. I took out my phone and found Linda's number, but I couldn't press it for a long time. I still remember that when I moved out the day before yesterday, we had a fight because I didn't buy insecticide. Then she forced me to pay back the money I owed. I left the guitar in embarrassment and almost ran away. Would it be too unmanly to call her now? No matter what, I'm just a scumbag in her eyes anyway. So what integrity can I talk about? I muttered something, then with the reputation of being a scumbag, I got bolder and pressed the dial button. Listening to the dial tone, I was actually a little nervous. This nervousness was justified. I was worried that Linda would sneer at my shameless behavior, and I was even more worried that she would not be willing to help. After a while, the call was connected, and I heard Linda's serious voice again. Why are you calling me? Help me in this emergency. Help me? Are you planning to jump into the river or lake again? I was almost choked to death by Linda, and after a while I said, I'm not jumping into the river this time. Do you remember last time at my friend's wedding, I told a woman that you were my girlfriend? You still dare to mention this? I immediately followed Linda's words and sighed. Ah, isn't this the thing that got me into trouble? My friends all said they wanted to meet you and are on their way. Please come to Soho Bar and rescue me. Even Jesus can't save people like you. Please don't insult me. This is really urgent. If you hadn't come, I would be so embarrassed today. Who cares about you? Please, okay, I said anxiously, as if one had to bow his head under the eaves. Linda replied unmoved. May the best be to you. I was furious. You are the reincarnation of Nunmiju. Do you have any sense of chivalry? Damn it, don't let me see you in Suzhou again. The phone was suddenly hung up. I was completely dumbfounded when I heard the beep. Hang up tone. Chapter 28. Keep your tail between your legs. After Linda hung up the phone on me resolutely, I no longer had any illusions about her. I had to bear the consequences of my own mistakes. In fact, it was completely normal that Linda was unwilling to come to the rescue, and my threat to her, don't let me see her in Suzhou, was truly rude and unreasonable. At a loss, I scratched my head and really wanted to leave the bar. I didn't want to face Emmy and Xiangchun from the bottom of my heart. This unwillingness was just to make myself feel better, but I couldn't escape tonight because escape would only mean that I couldn't let go of Emmy at all. Just 10 minutes later, I saw a group of 4 people walk into the bar, Leo and Haley in front, Xiangchun and Emmy behind. The 4 of them walked towards me, talking and laughing, but I wished I could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Emmy was wearing Chanel fashion and holding a new Hermes bag. Her luxury items were so overwhelming that I couldn't bear to look at her directly. I quickly fixed my gaze on Haley and Leo and lit a cigarette to hide my uneasiness. Haley and Leo sat on the sofa on my left, Emmy and Xiangchun sat on my right, and I was still alone in the middle. Leo and Haley looked around and asked me in unison, "Where's your girlfriend?" "She's not free tonight. Let's have fun." I responded. Haley said with an unhappy look on her face, "Don't spoil the fun. Call me again to make an appointment. We'll be fine in a while." I glared at Haley and said, "Stubborn girl, why are you arguing with me?" I said she was busy. "So why are you so stubborn? Stop talking bullshit and call your girlfriend right away so I can see what my future sister-in-law looks like." Leo kicked me and said. Xiangqin continued, "Max, don't spoil the fun. We can squeeze out time. Ask your girlfriend to come out and play. We are all old friends, so it's boring to play." I looked at Emmy. At this moment, deliberately keeping a distance from her would make me seem like I couldn't let go. So I said, "I feel energetic." It's been more than 3 years since I last saw Emmy. Old faces have become new faces now, right? Emmy's sister-in-law. Emmy, who had been silent since she came in, looked at me and asked, "What did you call me?" When Emmy asked me this, the cool attitude I had just deliberately put on suddenly collapsed, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond to Emmy's words. Leo quickly came to my rescue and said to Emmy, Max was right. Strictly speaking, you are his sister-in-law. When you marry Xiang Chun, it will be more legitimate. Emmy glanced at Leo and said, Why are you so excited? Did I say he shouted wrong? I didn't hear it clearly just now. Leo smiled awkwardly. I remained silent. Xiang Chun held Emmy in his arms and whispered a few words in her ear that no one else could hear. But this intimate gesture made my heart ache again. How Xiang Chun felt when Emmy and I were together and doing intimate things without any hesitation. I picked up the beer and took a sip. I wanted to leave here. I knew that as long as I still loved Emmy, such a party would be torture for me. But in the eyes of Xiang Chun, and even Leo and Haley, I had let go of Emmy. After all, more than 2 years had passed, and after all, I had a new girlfriend. The waiter brought the wine that Leo and his friends ordered, and they started drinking. Haley leaned towards me and whispered, Max, Leo, and I are really happy to know that you have a girlfriend. We were worried that you wouldn't be able to let go of Emmy, but now it seems that our worries were unnecessary. I felt bitter in my heart. At this moment, what would it matter if everyone knew that I couldn't let go? It would be better to keep this lie and let my friends feel at ease. Haley pushed me, who was silent, and said, Hurry up and call your girlfriend over and introduce her to us. Then we'll have another girlfriend to go shopping with. I forced a smile and said, Maybe next time. She's really busy today. Haley looked disappointed. At this moment, almost all eyes in the bar were suddenly focused on a figure walking towards her. She had such a good figure, and her walk was so graceful and soft. It was just that I couldn't see her face clearly under the swaying light, but this did not prevent me from judging that she was a beautiful woman with temperament. She walked towards me, and the flickering light finally fell on her face. I was so shocked that I almost slipped off the sofa. Who else could it be but Linda? Only she could be so attractive and attract so many eyes. Linda spotted me and walked towards me with grace. I quickly stood up, and before she walked in front of everyone, I pulled her aside and asked in a low voice, Why are you here? Didn't you say, I don't want you to see me in Suzhou? I came to see what the consequences will be if you see me. Linda looked at me with a smile. So, you're here to cause trouble to me, not to help? I said with a gloomy face. Linda looked at me and said, You are the one who threatened me. How can you say that I came to you? Now I am here, you can do it. I was like a snake being strangled by Linda, afraid that she would destroy me in front of everyone. So I had to soften my tone and said, I was just angry, so please don't bother with me, okay? Linda said disdainfully, Where is your arrogant attitude just now? Sister, I was wrong. I will behave myself from now on. Are you begging for mercy? Yeah. Please ask again. I felt powerless, but I couldn't resist, so I gritted my teeth and said, I was wrong. I will behave myself from now on. Over there, Leo shouted at me. Max, what are you whispering about? Hurry up and introduce your girlfriend to us. I'll be right there, I replied, and then asked Linda, Are you feeling calm now? Linda didn't say anything, as if she was deliberately making me uneasy. Only then did I realize how difficult this woman was to deal with and how she would not respond to any threats or tricks. I lowered my voice again and said, Just give me some advice. Remember to buy insecticide powder tomorrow. The cockroaches in the bathroom are as annoying as you, Linda said and walked towards the crowd ahead of me. I didn't react for a long time, and then I wondered, was she letting me go and saving me from danger? Linda sat where I had just sat and greeted everyone, and I sat down next to her. Haley smiled and said to me, Max, you have a good eye. Your girlfriend is amazing and beautiful. That's for sure. We are a perfect match. Let me introduce you formally. This is my girlfriend, Linda. My tone was full of pride, but my heart was filled with trepidation. God knows what was in mind for this woman who didn't play by the rules. Hello, everyone. Linda smiled and greeted everyone. Leo, Haley, Xiangchen introduced themselves to Linda in turn, and finally Emmy. Linda and Emmy looked at each other with the same indifferent expression, but I couldn't understand what was hidden behind their expressions. Emmy spoke first. We met that day. Linda just nodded. Strictly speaking, she was not the kind of person who was very outgoing and was a little cold in front of strangers. My name is Emmy, and I'm Max's ex-girlfriend. We are all very open people, so we are not surprised that Emmy introduced herself in this way. Besides, there is nothing to hide. By making the relationship clear, we can get along with each other more openly in the future. Linda responded to Emmy with a polite smile and said hello without saying anything else, but the atmosphere became cold because of her indifference. Haley began to liven up the atmosphere and asked Linda, When did you and Max meet? He did a great job keeping it a secret. We only found out about it yesterday. Linda nervously. If she didn't expose me at this moment, then I could have gotten through this uncomfortable party today safely. It's been a while. Linda's answer was vague, but it was a flawless answer. Haley smiled and said, "We will leave Max to you from now on. He has a wild temper, so you have to take care of him." Linda nodded and said, "We have to take care of him. His character is a bit poor." Haley didn't react for a moment. She looked at Linda and then at me with a confused expression. Chapter 29, Elop. In Haley's puzzled look, I said, "Don't look at me with those big puzzled eyes of yours. Haven't you ever insulted Leo between young lovers? Insulting each other is beneficial to the healthy development of their relationship. Everyone here knows that I am a person of excellent character." After that, he complained to Linda, "Stop making trouble. If you say bad things about me, let's go home and flirt with each other. These guys are all bad friends. Don't get involved with them. Max, you are really crazy. For the sake of your own great image, you have demoted a group of me." Xiangqun said, "I'm always good at that." This time Linda took the initiative to answer. "Then I said that you have a bad character. Am I right?" "That's absolutely right." Everyone agreed, then smiled knowingly and raised their glasses to clink them together. The atmosphere finally became a little more lively. I drank the remaining half bottle of beer in one gulp, feeling a little relieved, but I glanced at Emmy from the corner of my eye. Since entering the bar, she has been even quieter than Linda, and only occasionally speaks a few words to Xiangqun. Everyone continued chatting. Although I sat next to Linda, I didn't dare to have any physical contact with her for fear that she would get angry. I just hoped to end this party peacefully. I didn't want to participate in it again in the future. At this moment, only I knew the pain in my heart. I just wanted to stand behind Emmy and Xiangqun and silently wish them happiness, instead of being like this now. I had to join in the laughter and scolding of the crowd against my will, which filled my heart with pain, but I couldn't escape it. People, wearing a mask that doesn't fit your size is not only painful for your face, but also for your heart. Robin in the distance finally finished singing. He looked towards me with a microphone and said, "Max, come up and sing 2 songs to cheer up your friends." As soon as Robin finished speaking, Emmy was the first to applaud, followed by Leo, Xiangqun, and others who also applauded and whistled, and the atmosphere in the entire bar became high. I glanced at everyone, nodded to Robin, and then walked towards the stage. Robin handed me the guitar in his hand, and then he took the bass from the band member Xiaowu and worked with me. I took a deep breath and asked for a song called Elopement by Zhengjun. "A song of elopement for you." I plucked the guitar strings, closed my eyes, and some fragmented images floated into my mind again. I dedicated my youth to the glorious city behind me. We paid a price for this beautiful dream. I left my love to the most sincere girl beside me. You accompanied me in singing, wandering, and hurting each other. Until now, I suddenly realized that what I dreamed of was true love and freedom. I wanted to take you and elope to the farthest town. I want to elope with you and be the happiest person. Elope, elope, elope. In the tearing sound, I improvised and sang 3 elopements in a row. My emotions were completely released at this moment. Before Emmy went abroad, we were forced into a desperate situation. We had back in Suzhou from Shanghai and wanted to elope from Suzhou to Tibet. At that time, we naively thought that we could elope to the ends of the earth with the courage in this song. We also thought that a guitar, 2 people, running all the way would be the happiest people. We also thought that elopement can let us steal 2 people's lives from the real world. Heavy metal music tore through my desires, and all worldly noises were drowned in the song Elopement. I have never been so hysterical. I wish I could tear the world apart and tear apart the illusion. The music gradually stopped, and the applause began to roar. I still looked up, and after a long time, I returned the guitar to Robin beside me and walked towards the bathroom without looking back. In the bathroom mirror, my face was covered with water stains, but I was glad that I had finally hidden it from the world and successfully concealed the pain and suppressed tears. Once, she was my faith in this city of desire. Now, that faith has ruthlessly collapsed, and all the hurt, pain, and desire are suppressed deep in my heart. Finally, they can no longer bear the burden and mutate in the time of a song, wringing my nerves. Outside the bar, everyone said goodbye. The 3 of us men were all a little drunk. Leo put his arm around Haley's shoulder and walked towards their car first. Emmy supported the unconscious Xiangqun. Only Linda and I kept an imperceptible distance. Emmy helped Xiangqun into the car, and when we thought she was going to leave, She turned around and walked towards Linda and me. She stood in front of me and Linda, but didn't look at me. She said to Linda, "Go back and give him a glass of milk with honey. His stomach is not in good condition." Linda nodded, and Emmy looked at me, who was standing a little unsteadily. She nodded to Linda, turned around, and walked towards the car without saying anything else. I stared at her back for a long time and couldn't recover from my shock. "She's gone," Linda said to me. "Oh," I responded numbly. "Where do you live? I'll take you back." "No need. I can just take a taxi myself." Linda smiled and said, "I promised your ex-girlfriend to make you a cup of honey milk. I don't like to break my promise. Let's go then." Linda was driving, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, watching the car passing through the tall buildings, carrying the lights and shadows of the city. I felt a little dizzy and knew that the alcohol was taking effect. After a long silence, Linda finally asked me, "You sang that song just now for your ex-girlfriend, right? Her name is Emmy. Why? You don't like people calling her your ex-girlfriend?" I replied awkwardly, "We've already severed our relationship, so wouldn't it be better to just call each other by their names?" Linda smiled and said, "I'm afraid your heart is not as clean as you say." I didn't answer, but stared at Linda for a long time, then suddenly said, "Drive faster. I feel like vomiting." "Then get out of the car and vomit. Go home and vomit. Drive faster." I urged again, and my words became fluent. Linda stepped on the brakes and the car stopped immediately. "Get out of the car and vomit. Isn't it uncomfortable to hold it in? There's a river over there." Although I felt dizzy, I wasn't about to vomit. The reason I wanted to vomit was just because I didn't want to talk to her about Emmy. But the inertia caused by the sudden stop almost made me spray out all the alcohol accumulated in my stomach. This woman always seemed to be able to see through my lies and then punish me. I opened the car door, crawled to the river, and started vomiting hysterically. I felt a little exhausted and lay flat on the ground in a spread eagle position. Looking at the twinkling starry sky, I felt dizzy again. Linda came over to me and handed me a tissue, saying in a reproachful tone, "I'll let you drink so much again. If you hadn't stepped on the brakes so hard just now, I wouldn't have vomited." I still spoke unsteadily. "Really? You were teasing me again?" Only then did I realize that I had confessed myself again, so I simply pretended to be dead and lay on the ground without moving. "Keep pretending. I'm leaving now." I recalled the night when Linda abandoned me in the wilderness. I grabbed her hand and said, "Don't go." I held Linda's hand tightly and refused to let go, fearing that I would be stranded alone in this place with few people and cars passing by. Linda was a little flustered. She struggled and asked me to let go. I hugged her legs tightly again, as if I had found support, comfort, and the lost past. "Max, let go quickly. You've drunk too much. Don't act crazy." Linda's words became more nervous. Such physical contact was too intimate for us. "Let me hold you for a while. Don't go." My voice was choked with sobs. "I'm not Emmy, Max. Wake up." Linda held my shoulders and struggled violently. Finally, she pushed me to the ground and ran towards her car. Lying on the ground again, my world was dark. The cold autumn wind gradually woke me up. After lying for a while, I stood up and walked towards Linda's car. However, Linda was still frightened and firmly disagreed with me sitting in the passenger seat and pushed me to the back. The car started again and drove towards the bright lights ahead, carrying my sense of loss as I gradually woke up. Chapter 30. A Sudden Opportunity.